I've known you a long time. I've seen you in a very long time.
Mhm.
But I would love if you could, like, how would you introduce yourself? Like, if you explained yourself and maybe what you do at your speaking engagements, like, how would you say who you are?
Oh, well, I just tell people, my name is Will Jimeno. I'm a retired Port Authority police detective and a 9/11 survivor. And today, I live a good life, and I try to inspire people and motivate people when I can, to make people's lives better. And I just want people to be able to live a good life because life is short. And basically, that's all I do as a survivor. I just try to inspire and motivate people that are in dark places so they can also, be able to see happiness. And that's all I want for people is just happiness.
Your story is also one of just like unbelievable determination and unbelievable grit to not giving up, on your part and the people that were coming and looking for
Mm-hmm.
you. That day changed everything, right? What's your relationship to it now? How often is it in the forefront of your mind? How often do you think about it? How often do you think about being under that building? How present is it in your mind, and how present are the people around you that you lost and the families of the folks that you lost?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, people always ask me when you think about 9/11. Pretty much every day I wake up, but in a grateful way because I'm alive, which is mind boggling. And there are times like my wife Allison just the other day, I was telling her, like, I'm alive. I can't believe that, and it really creeps up on you. And I think about it every day because, again, there's so many people don't have what I've had to be able to live 23 years after, to see my girls grow up. But I have a great relationship with my Sergeant McLaughlin, who they ended up promoting to lieutenant. We keep in touch, and many other people from that day who have been suffering because of the ailments, including Scott Strauss and Patty McGee,
Mm-hmm.
the two ESU officers from the NYPD who rescued me. They've been battling a lot of things. For me, I've been blessed that, even though I have injuries to my left leg that are severe and I have to wear a brace and I can't do things like I used to, I'm still able to do things. Am I waiting for that 9/11 illness to creep up? Maybe it will. I knock on wood, I still am very healthy. Um, as far as the fellow officers, I keep in touch with Christina Rodriguez, Antonio Rodriguez's wife, and I pray for them every single day, all the families. I do know that most of the kids have grown up in a good, positive way. Not only the three that were on my team, but many others. We lost 37. The Port Authority Police did, the most in law enforcement history, because the World Trade Center was ours. So that's why we lost so many officers, followed by 23 of the NYPD, and of course 343 firefighters, and then the countless civilians. So I don't only think about those that were lost directly to me, but everybody that day and how it changed the course of this nation, the course of the world. And what I do in remembering 9/11 is just try to be a good person. I really do. I mean, on 9/11, man, I was a Buffy guy. I mean, I love being a cop. That's all I wanted to be since I was a little kid. And I always thought myself as a tough guy. I was 33. I've been in the military, got out. Not those 9 months leading up to September 11th. I was at the bus terminal, so where you could be a real cop. You
Yeah.
you really dealt with a lot of
Yeah.
things, gang members, unfortunately criminals. Never ever thought about it as a job. It was a dream of mine. It
Mm-hmm.
was never anything that I went to work fearing. My wife didn't fear it. I would come back with crazy stories that as a young macho guy, that's what you want, and then unfortunately you're hit with reality. I think that things, especially young men, I'll talk about young men that go into the military looking for war, and then war comes, and then you realize, this is something that you hope nobody else sees.
Mm.
And on 9/11, I thought, hey, man, I could save the world. And you realize you're a small speck in this world.
Mm.
What makes us strong is when we come together.
Mm.
And we lost so many people that gave their lives that day. And since then, because I would say 9/11 didn't end that day. It continued on through the GWOT war and so many airmen, Marines, sailors, Army, Coast Guards that we lost, kept up that war. And really, just trying to make our world a better place by fighting evil.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, I tell people, people have always asked me, do you hate Muslims? And I said, I think the testament to me was my upbringing, my mom and dad, always raised me to be a good human being. And I remember it was probably like 2 years after 9/11. I was still living in Clifton, New Jersey, and it's literally at the end of Clifton, where I lived. The next town over was Patterson, and that's where some of the hijackers were. So we have a large Muslim population. I remember going to pick up my daughter Bianca at the school, and as I was pulling up, there was a woman about to cross the driveway into the entrance of the school, and she was Muslim, and she had her Muslim attire on, and I had the right of way. I was going to make a left to pull into that driveway, and I saw her like stop to look at me, like, you know, and I said, Will, for a second in me, I was like, fuck her.
Mm.
And then I realized that's not who I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't be that. I can't be that hate, that evil. So I stopped the truck and I said, "Man, go ahead." I let her walk by. And I said, I won't hate a particular group because of what a small group within them do, because that's not good advances in any way, shape, or form, in a good way.
I mean,
my mom always encouraged me. I mean, my parents came from Barranquilla, Colombia. I always tell people, if they don't know where Barranquilla is, where Shakira's from and Sofia Vergara, but they're the better version looking people than I am. But, they came here with the dream of every immigrant. And my mom told me, you know what? We're going to come here. We're going to remember our heritage. We're going to fly the American flag. We're going to learn English. But most importantly, we're going to get good people. And my mom always said, you know how with this country we deal with so much with minorities and racism and this. And my mom said, I don't want to hear about that. I want you to be raised as a person that's a good human being.
Mm.
That's how you represent our family.
Mm.
You represent our culture. And eventually, as an American, you're going to represent this country. And that's what, on that day, when I had to make that choice, was my upbringing. And I think today what we fail at is being able to do what we had time for back then. I mean, right now, today, we have these that disrupt our lives all the time. But to be able to sit at the dinner table with your children, instill in them, know what's going on in their lives, and hammer it into their head about being a good human being, what that is.
Yeah.
And they were good examples. My dad was always just a good example of a hard worker. I don't want to hear excuses. You know what's right, what's wrong. My dad always told me, he goes, by 12 years old, if you don't know what's right or what's wrong, I fail as a parent.
Mm.
And he said, you know what's right or wrong. And it's hard to do the right thing. It is hard. On that day, there was a side of me because, I thought about my friends that I lost. But at the same time, I'll be like, my friends would, because they were all good guys. I could not, Christopher Amoroso, just who you portrayed in the movie, just a solid dude. Dominic Pizzulo, who gave his life up trying to get me in the sergeant out. Antonio Rodriguez, who switched spots with me before the buildings came down, just trying to be a good team member. I said, those guys would not be mean or be nasty towards someone because of what happened. And so I try to, instill in others what has been instilled in me, and that's be a good human being. And it's hard because there's temptation. If there's $1,000 sitting there and nobody's looking, are you going to take it or are you going to leave it? And again, are you going to be a nasty person to someone because something bad happened to you? No, because those individuals that are good people that might represent a certain group, they just want to live their lives. And that's what I tell people is, if you think about it, throughout the world, we see all these wars going on. The majority of people just want peace. They want to grow up. They want to be able to see their kids grow up and get married and have grandchildren. I guarantee you, and I had that because serving in the military, going on to 11 different countries, the one thing I always learned was people are people everywhere. Right. And people really want to be able to have a good life and not have peace. And then you have, unfortunately, politics and people that want power that ruin everything. But for the majority of people, on 9/11, when we ran into those buildings, we didn't say, hey, we're going to save the white person, not the Muslim. No, right. You just save people because, and I always get that question asked, what did you see the most on 9/11? And people always are shocked. And I said, you know what I saw the most of? Love. When we were heading from the police desk through the concourse, there was a steady line of people coming out of Tower 1. And I still remember all these strangers helping each other. Yeah. And I tell people, listen, there were people of different backgrounds, religion, race. I saw a black man with a white man carrying a blonde woman who had a severe cut on her leg in a single file line. And I said, I guarantee you, if we were to sit down with those people, they had different political views, probably different views of people in general.
All that shit goes out the window.
They were all helping each other. Yeah. Through speaking engagements, not only do I motivate first responders, but a lot of schools I go to, I just try to tell people, listen, we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. If you look back in time, There's always been racism. There's always been rape, murder, and it continues today. What we can do in our world is be good people. So that means we're going to make mistakes. So I tell children this. Sometimes you talk about bullying, but sometimes you're the bully even though you're a good person. We make mistakes. It's catching those mistakes and becoming better. So I tell people, try to be nice to each other. You know, when you see a bunch of kids ganging up on the kids, be that brave person who steps in and says, hey, why don't you leave that person alone? You know, that could be you one day, or it could be your kid down the line. And it takes a lot of courage. I tell kids this a lot. It takes a lot of courage for you to be able to stand up and stand up for someone who's weaker.
Yep.
If you're that young and can stand up for good things, you'll realize later in life, I did the right thing.
Tell me why police? Like why law enforcement? Like what was like the first time you realized that's what you want? And also what you speak, I want to get into a little bit later, just kind of like about how you feel sort of the state of things are right now for law enforcement. But when you were saying it, you know, like it really hit me to be prejudiced against an entire group for the acts of a few is so asinine. And so and honestly, if you look at the events of the last few years, that's really fell on the head of law enforcement. It's really, and I think like just now we're seeing the effect of vilifying law enforcement the way that we have and what happens when you do that. But just take us through why law enforcement for you and why you made that choice.
Yeah, people always ask me, why'd you want to be a cop? And I was a young kid. Back then, we didn't have cable. You had only a certain amount of channels. I think we had 2, 4, 5, 7, 10, and PBS. But on Channel 9, they used to run the black and white movies of World War II, Vietnam, Korea. And I used to watch those movies. And I watched the bravery of Americans. And also the police shows, you know, Adam 12, The Blue Knight, Emergency. And I was just always enthralled by the courage of people being able to help people. And I'll be honest with you, I'm just a Buffy kid. I love uniforms, man. I would see
What's
the
that mean, a
uniforms.
Buffy kid? What does that mean?
Buffy, you're into it. You know, you're just like a tough guy. You want to be, you know, you're that guy that just has all the bells and whistles, has all the stuff on the gun belt, you know, like Batman. My favorite character has always been Batman. But I was always inspired about watching people help other people. My mom was a big thing like that. My mom would always, you know, being Latin, you know, on the weekend, she was a beautician, so everybody come to the house. My mom would help so many people in so many different ways. And I just saw the smile it put on people's faces. And when I see cops, I would see how they made people feel safe. And I was growing up in Hackensack, New Jersey. The Hackensack Police Department was very paramilitary. I mean, it gets crazy to the point, like, if they had to go in a bar fight, they'd get written up if they didn't have their hat on. They just looked sharp. They were respected. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a Hackensack cop. I wanted to be Hackensack Police Department. So that was always my goal. And it was really to help other people. I saw, as I grew up, one cop, his name was Ralph. Can't even remember his last name. He was a Hackensack cop. And this is back in the day. They were carrying 38s. And we were all joining little gangs. I was in a gang called the Barracudas. And I remember him rolling up in our neighborhood. And instead of busting our chops, he walked up and said, what are you guys doing with these gangs? And he would talk to us and make sense. Like, this is stupid what we're doing, you know? And I always thought, like, wow, this guy inspired me. He actually touched my life. And I remember thinking to myself, that's what a police officer should be doing. Not only stopping crime and doing the macho stuff that as a macho kid you want to do, but actually being able to inspire people, you know? So for me, it was always law enforcement.
He saw you as a human being. He saw you as a kid. He saw you as...
And you're talking a time back then where, if you want to talk racism, they could call you different names. I mean, people... But I was blessed. I mean, my parents always worked really hard. We grew up on Union Street in Hackensack for a while, and my parents moved us to apartments on Central Avenue. It was pretty much African American. So I had a relationship with African Americans, Latinos, and whites, because I went to Catholic school, St. Francis of Assisi, and we had a mixture, Italians, black. So racism for me wasn't an issue because I was just in a melting pot of people. And yeah, you would hear the N-word thrown around or the S-word, you know, to Spanish people. But my mom always taught me, remember, those people are ignorant. You need to be above them. And I was blessed in a way. I really didn't find a lot of racism because I played sports.
That's right.
I was doing martial arts, and it were people from just different backgrounds. So I didn't look at him in any aspect. And that's my friend. So he's black. Well, that's my friend. He's Hispanic. Well, that's my friend. He's white. It didn't really matter to me. And then when I went to Hackensack High School, we were a melting pot. So we had all the kids from Hackensack, but then we had a lot of white people from Maywood, New Jersey, and Rochelle Park. And I remember one of the first guys I became friends with is this one guy. He was a rocker. You know, he'd always wear the Rush shirt, all those shirts, you know. And he didn't understand me. Like, you play soccer, you do karate, you know, come on, you know, I don't smoke weed. But I used to get along with everybody.
Yeah,
And it was
yeah,
just,
yeah.
I just started looking at people as, you know, I'm going to treat you the way you treat me.
That's
And
it.
that's what my mom always taught me.
That's it.
Respect people. If they don't respect you, don't give them the respect back and just leave them out of your
That's
life.
it.
And
That's it.
I think Hackensack High School for me was a big thing on just being able to gel with people.
Yeah.
That made my transition to the military even easier, because by the time I got to the military, it didn't matter. I mean, it was great for the military because now I was meeting people from across the country.
Yep. Yep.
And my bunkmate, actually, his name was Steve Rabalis, I think it was his name. He's from Louisiana.
Yep.
And if he's watching this, man, it's a true story. I mean, you know, after the first couple of days back then where they would really be mean on us, you know, yelling at us and everything like that, we had time to kind of talk. But one morning we were getting ready.
Yeah.
And I saw that he had left one of his skivvies out, and I actually hit it to save him. And he said, man, thank you so much. He had this real Cajun accent.
Yeah.
So he was from a real small town, Louisiana.
Got it.
And we actually had time to talk that day. And he looks at me and he goes, what are you? So I'm looking at him, I'm like, what do you mean, what am I? He's like, well, you ain't black and you ain't white.
Yeah.
And I started realizing.
Was there a sinister tone to it? Or was he just
no,
curious?
he was actually just
curious.
like
Yeah,
curious.
yeah,
Like,
God
he's
bless
like,
him.
what are you?
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, because that's how much pressure we had. We couldn't even talk. We were so scared.
Totally,
We're getting yelled at.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm Spanish. I'm Hispanic. He goes, I don't know what that is. And I realized at that moment, this guy was being legit. And so he explained to me, he comes from a small town. I think it was like maybe 100 people. They didn't really get out. And there was no internet back then.
Sure.
So all he knew was black and white. And I said, no, bro, I'm Hispanic. And I started learning at that point, like, you really have to step back and listen to people, because people come from different parts of the world, within America, where they're just so different. And we assume that everybody should know everything. And we became good friends. And, you know, I explained to him what a Spanish person was.
Yeah.
And it goes to his education. That was the scary part, that his education from that small town wasn't great. So that's why I tell people, and one thing that my mom always told me is, there is no excuse. Don't use anything as a crutch. Don't use that you're a minority, you're not smart enough. This world allows you to be as good as you can if you put the hard work into it, you know. And he really asked me a lot of questions about being Spanish.
Dude,
which
it's
is
such
cool.
a beautiful story, man, because it's like nowadays, you know, just that question would have flagged all kinds of microaggressions and how dare you say that, and you could have gone the other. And the truth is that curiosity, you saved his ass with the skivvies. You judge you by the content of your character, you know what I mean, not by anything else. And then that genuine curiosity of who are you led to your genuine curiosity of him. And then you were able to kind of see him from where he came up, and he was able to see you from where you came up. And you guys ended up being friends. You can learn so much from each other. And I feel like so much of that genuine curiosity is crushed because everybody's worried about saying the wrong thing and being offensive. Whereas there's actually nothing more vulnerable and more, I think, galvanizing than being genuinely curious about people and being able to ask a question without worrying about, you know, really offending someone.
And that's what's great about podcasts like this, where you can actually just be yourself, talk about it, and say, again, you know, maybe I ask a question, maybe it's the wrong question, I offended somebody, but maybe that person will explain why it's offensive. And then I learned something like, okay, maybe next time I meet someone like you, I understand your plight in life. Not everybody understands what everybody else goes through.
That's right.
You know, that was like one of the main things after 9/11, trying to find a new normal. I remember being in CVS and I'm like getting something. This is like the year after, and it's raw. 9/11, we're still pulling bodies out of there. And I'm walking around CVS and everybody's walking around normal. And it's like, I want to yell, do you know what the fuck just happened to me and my team in America, and you people just walking around normal? And I think that's something that people who have gone through tragedy sometimes have a hard time with, because unfortunately life doesn't stop. You know, you get hurt in any way, shape, or form, the next day it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. And a lot of people don't stop, and they're not going to know your story. They're just going to go about their day. And you realize, like, you want to stop time. And one of my biggest things was listening to what my mom said. You can't use what happened to you as a crutch. You're going to have to pick up and go, because life doesn't care. So all the stuff we argue about, you know, whether it's racism or you're rich, I'm poor, or whatever, life doesn't care about. The new day comes and it's going to keep going. It's going to keep rolling. And it's going to take you a little bit to get back on your feet after tragedy, but that's the main message I bring to people, is that you can, and you deserve it, because you deserve happiness. You know, I see too many people live in a bad space, uh, even without tragedy. And that's my main goal, is when I have the opportunity to help people, to try to let them know life is short. I always use this example. I tell kids this. I said, listen, if you're lucky to live till 90 years old, there's 365 days in a year. When we're born, we're in diapers. And a lot of times, if you make it to 90, you might be in diapers
That's
again.
right. Yeah.
But do the math, kids. 365 times 90, if you're lucky to get to 90, look how many days you have on this earth. And a lot of us don't even reach 90. So when you do the multiplication and you start subtracting how many days we've been on this earth, we don't have that many days. So you try to be able to live a life that's fulfilling, that you can be happy, that you can look back on the day that you're going to die and say, I lived a good life. I don't have any regrets. And that's difficult to do, because we're all caught up in the moment. We're all caught up in whatever the new thing on social media is, the news. And I tell people, man, the best times, and like we talked about, you know, I'm a big outdoorsman, big bow hunter. The best times in my life is when I come back from hunting camp, because yeah, I keep up on the news, but I'm not watching the news. I don't watch any of the cable channels, because we're in a cabin somewhere. We're just talking hunting, throwing hunting stories, and you come home refreshed. Like, the world's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The world's
Mm-hmm.
good.
Mm-hmm.
Because I tell people that if you watch too much news, what you're doing is falling into that trap. And sometimes I do it. You know, I'll start watching news, I start getting angry, I start getting aggravated. When I don't watch the news, but still keep up on current events that I need to know about, you realize that, man, I feel good. I feel good about me. I feel good about the world, and that it's going to be okay. So I tell people, you know, when you're in a bad place, stop and think about why you're in that bad place, and do your best to figure out a way out of it. And when you feel happy, you feel healthier, and you're able to do more things around that are positive for you and your family.
You join the police department. It's a dream come true for you. Like you said, you're at the bus terminal. They call them BT dogs, right?
Yeah, BT, yeah.
I got to see a little bit of, Sergeant Finney and Officer Fairbanks. You know,
Oh, God bless them. Yeah,
yeah, man, the best in the world. That
yeah, they're great.
I got to do 30 days with those guys, and
Yeah,
my time with those guys in the bus terminal. For me, I still look at as one of the biggest gifts in my life, because I saw that, doing this job, that if you wanted to do it for real, you had access into folks who really walked on the fragile lines of this world,
yeah,
where things could go either way, and they're
yeah,
right there in it every day, dealing with the hardest and the most complicated of our issues, and they're the ones that are really dealing with, not talking about it,
yeah,
not philosophizing about it, but they're in the issues where danger and bravery and courage and being kind and being empathetic. It's like, it's all like right there. And those guys really brought me in, and we became really good friends. But explain kind of like because Giuliani was mayor,
back then it was Giuliani.
right? So
Yes.
so you're like explain what like being a cop at that time was in the bus terminal.
You know, I was blessed, because again, it took me 6 years to become a cop, because I was a Jersey guy. So the Port Authority Police is the major transportation facility in New York and New Jersey. So we have all the bridges, the tunnels, the airports, the PATH train, the Brooklyn Piers, Port Newark. So we're pretty much protecting all the major transportation facilities in the metropolitan area. But I was a Jersey guy, but I worked in Midtown Manhattan at the bus terminal, and those two buildings just are a life within themselves.
Yeah.
So we're protecting all the pedestrians that are coming through there. We're aiding them with information, God forbid, a medical. But it's also a place that attracts a lot of, let's just say, shady characters.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, from
Yeah.
EDPs, emotionally disturbed people, to criminals who are looking to take advantage of the people coming through the bus terminal, to gang members. And for me, it was great. I mean, I got to work with Squad 4, which included Bill Finney, Jeff Fairbanks, and these guys were hardened cops, because they were taught from guys who were Vietnam vets going in. And the bus terminal in the 80s and 90s was a very, very tough place. And so it created tough cops. But these guys were sharp, and they wanted to see guys that worked. And that's all I wanted to do, was work. So I was brought into a great squad that taught me. I still remember one of my first collars. I just walked past some actually Latino guys, and walk past, and this is back when marijuana was illegal. And I walked past him, I could smell the weed. I'm like, yo, I turned around. And so I started a conversation with them. Long story short, I was able to figure out they were carrying some stuff. So I throw them up. It's three guys. I throw them up against the wall. One guy looked like he was going to turn. I called away for backup. And I remember, here comes Bill Finney. And Bill Finney is a strapping 6'4" African American guy. And he's the guy that he don't care what color you're. You're blue. You're my brother.
That's right.
And he kind of took me under his wing, him and Fairbanks, because they saw I wanted to work. And I had these guys, and one of them was going to make a move, and I'm like getting ready. God, let's see what's going to happen here. But as soon as I saw Finney come, I'm like, this is the guy you want coming straight up. I mean, he'd take all three guys out.
Yeah.
And I remember it turned out to be a good marijuana collar, and I was happy. And I was like, man, this is what I love doing here. And there was always work to be done at the bus run because there were always hustlers. There was always somebody trying to mug somebody. Yep. So it was a great, great environment to learn to be a cop. And you had to think quickly on your feet. But going to empathy, you also, we had a lot of runaway kids. So you learn to be tough and be able to switch it off to be empathetic to people. Just because even the criminals themselves, sometimes, you talk to them when you collar them up and you realize, man, they got a bad life, man. They things weren't good for them. So you just learn how to deal with people and not judge people or hate people. You just took the job as it came. And believe it or not, there was some of the, if you want to call them criminals, the people we locked up, that we'd see them later and they'd smile at us and wave at us. And, but you still have to keep your wits about you, because just because you're having a nice moment with them, they could turn on you.
And cops were being attacked. I mean, cops were being targeted.
Well, and back then we weren't targeted as much. Of course, the George Floyd incidents would really turn things. By then I wasn't a cop anymore. And I tell people, when you say, hey, cops suck, or, just, this is how I bring it down, is name me one profession that doesn't have bad apples in it. I'll take it even one step further. Parents. Do you know how many bad parents we have? So just understand that in every profession, and I'm not ashamed to say it, cops have bad apples, firefighters, priests. The George Floyd, should that cop keep his knee on that guy's neck that long? No. I mean, I'm a police officer because no, that's wrong. But that doesn't mean you demonize all cops. And do we have cops that need to be retrained or do, learn? Yeah, absolutely. In every other profession. But when you've demonized law enforcement, which was your question, to the point it is today, in certain cities, it's gotten to the point that the innocent people are suffering. Absolutely. Because the bad guys think they can get away with things, and they are. We just lost Detective Diller. The person that shot him should not have been on the street. And it looks at New York City like, hey, why are you now, the laws you have in place are actually favoring the bad person. Yeah. And yes, we're losing police officers, but who's suffering is our citizens. That's right. And we want to be able to have our citizens live in a good place. And I'll go back, I always say, unfortunately, once de Blasio took over and kind of went light on law enforcement, it just went south. Bloomberg had it under control. Giuliani had it under control. And again, I always tell people, let's forget politics. I'm someone that, I'm a conservative, but I have no problem with a Democratic person. I just want people in power that actually care about the people and law and order. We have to have law and order because you have law and order in your own home. You're the parent. You have to discipline your kids. If you don't, you have madness, chaos. And I'm not saying you got to be overly strict, but you have to have boundaries. And today I feel like people are taking boundaries away for emotional reasons. And that shouldn't be. I mean, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. And can we have empathy when somebody does something wrong? Absolutely. But when you have hardened criminals keep doing the same crime over, like right now, they talk about the subway crime. They're seeing, you see the police commissioner, it's the repeat offender. How can someone do something 100 times and us in a society just keep it going? So I just tell people, it comes back to common sense. It comes back to not using, we have to care for this person. After a while, you realize there's some people who don't care about things, and they're going to continue to hurt people. And I tell people this, if you're a person who's for that, just allowing that till it comes to your doorstep. God forbid it's your mother, your grandmother, someone you love gets hurt. Then you realize, but that's the problem. People make laws and sometimes they're kind of away from the events. And I tell people, nobody realizes, like cancer, right? For those of us who are very fortunate, who maybe have not lost people to cancer, that's a different world. But when that cancer hits your family
It's your
member or
whole
someone in
world.
your life, now it's changed.
Yeah.
And I think that we just need to try to understand that if we're going to be a society that wants a good environment for our people, we have to have laws. We have to be empathetic to people, but at the same time, we don't go to that empathy to the point that we just let people do whatever they
That's
want.
right.
That's wrong.
That's
You
right.
know what I mean? I mean, and there have to be severe consequences. I mean,
And
no different than I always use my father as an example. So I grew up with a young man who was a good friend of mine, and I was a good kid, but I did bad things. I mean, I wanted to be a cop, but this one particular young man, he used to teach me how to pickpocket.
mm-hmm,
It's terrible, and I
mm-hmm,
pickpocket. And after a while, we were growing older, and I started playing soccer. I started doing martial arts, and I started realizing, hey, that's wrong.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I remember telling bro, I'm not hanging out with you. I'm not doing that stuff.
mm-hmm,
He get
mm-hmm.
mad at me.
Yeah.
And turns out, we grow up. He ends up in jail for dealing drugs. I went off to the military, and then I became a cop. But I thank my father for that, because my father was very strict with me in the sense that he would work 2 jobs. So my dad always told me, he goes, you know what's right, what's wrong. And if I did something, back then, if a cop called my house or my school called my house, it was basically like, what did you do?
Right.
You know, today I speak at a lot of schools, and the superintendents tell me, I can't call a parent and tell them, hey, Susie or little Joey did something. Oh, no, you guys did something. Is it the way
Crazy. Yeah.
in my house, it was, what did you do?
Yep.
And my father back then would hit me.
Mm-hmm.
He'd hit me, but my father never hit me for no reason. There was actually a reason. Quick story: I was second grade. He gave me $5 for a book bag. I spent it looking like a rich guy to the kids, and I kept lying for him 2 weeks. He's like, "Where's this book bag?" Finally said, "We're gonna go to the school." And back then, I went to Catholic school, so the nuns were in a convent up there. So he knocks on the door. Get there, it's the main sister, Sister Gloria. God bless her. And he's like, "Oh, Will said he gave you $5 for this bag." And she's like, "No, he didn't." And I kept lying. I mean, I basically kept, and then finally, I remember that night, it started raining and thunder happened. It's almost like God. I finally confess. My dad kicked my ass that night.
Yeah.
He backslapped me. I had a big lip.
Yep.
I came into school the next day, and of course, they were like, "Oh my God!" All the kids started crying, like, "He gave me money. This Mr. Jimeno's gonna come get me." They ended up calling the cops, and because I was hurt. And I remember sitting there, and 2 detectives were in the office with my father and the principal. And I remember hearing my dad. And the cop said, "Well, Mr. Jimeno, you know, your son," he goes, "I hit him. He stole." And they started asking him questions. My dad knew what they wanted to know. So he rolled up his sleeve, said, "I'm not a heroin addict. I have 2 jobs. And you could take me to jail, but my son will never steal."
There you go.
And those cops back then got up, shook his hand, said, and when they walked out, they said, "Son, you better not steal." They did. Two detectives from Hackensack.
Yeah.
And I remember just as I grew up, I was tempted with things, and I started learning, don't do that. Yeah. Don't do that. You know what's right, what's wrong. And my father, I always thank him. You know, he's going to be 80 this year. And I tell him, "Dad, thank you for being who you were for me, keeping me on the right track." And I remember the time that, I think it's something stupid. I was older. I think I was in 8th grade. And, you know, again, at that point, we were doing martial arts, playing soccer. My legs got big. And I remember he hit me across the back of the legs. He used to hit me with the belt. And it didn't do anything to me. My legs got bigger, and I took it. And he goes, "Oh, you're smart. I want you to sit down, kneel down." Today, he'd go to jail for this. He goes, He knelt me down, took my shirt off. He goes, "I want you to put your hands out and hold these pencils. If you drop them, I'm going to slap you across the chest with the belt." I'm like, "Oh, man, that changed the game." And I started sweating. I think I held it for like 3 minutes, and I just couldn't. It was like, like when you're boxing, you realize how tough you are.
Straight up.
And I remember shaking, and he put it down. I was expecting to hit me, and he goes to me, he goes, "You know what? If I can't get through to you now, I didn't get through to you. Hitting you doesn't matter. You have to be a man now." And I said, "You know what, Dad? You're right.
You got it."
And the hitting is not, it's more, you know, when you're young, it kind of scares you. I mean, today he'd be locked up for that.
For sure.
But I tell my father, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, because my other friend, unfortunately, he's bettered himself in life, but he went through a really bad point. And I realized that, you know, a lot, again, goes back to your home. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a home, that's the other thing I tell people. And we have kids that are foster kids, orphans. There's always good people out there. Try to surround yourself by people that are going to be good instrumental tools for you to help you in life. Because there's stories of people who didn't have a family. I'm blessed.
For sure.
I had a family. And I tell this to kids. Don't use that as a crutch. That, well, my parents left me or they're divorced. No, because it's in you to find the right way, and you just have to seek those people, you know?
And I imagine for you as a cop too, when you're on the job, that you would see people, you see a pickpocket in the bus terminal, and part of you is like, hey, look, man, I was that kid to a certain extent, or my buddy was that kid. And to me, what truly does make you heroic before everything that even happened on 9/11 is this ability to mean what you say and say what you mean, but at the same time to have empathy and to look at everybody as a human being and to look at everybody as, hey, I'm going to give you a shot. I'm always going to give you a shot, but you don't take it. I'm going to come there just like your dad was with you. I'm going to teach you a lesson.
Yes, not everybody in jail deserves to be in there. In the past, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people that got collared up for weed and are doing a lot of time that they really, today we realize that shouldn't be the case.
For sure.
But these hardened criminals, you have to be hard on them. And unfortunately, and I only talk about New York from what I'm seeing, is they need to bring that. You know, I mean, it basically comes down to just seeing what happened this past week with Detective Diller and seeing the family member actually tell Governor Hochul to leave the funeral. I think that's pretty a clear sign of like, it's not just law enforcement. I think it's the people, but the people have to vote the right way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we are the people and we're the voice that can make change. So I don't blame these politicians because we're allowing them to do that. I think if you're a female in New York City who is tired of getting punched, you vote for better district attorneys, the people that are going to do what's right and not for political reasons, but just because it's right. The problem in our world, and my buddy's dad used to be a politician, and he used to say politics ruins everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And all I beg politicians is sometimes step away from your party lines and just do what's right. And again, it goes back to what I've said. It is tough to do the right thing.
For a lot of folks in this country, making their own personal sort of political and philosophical decisions from being so far away from the crux of the conflict is really dangerous, right? The folks that I'm friends with and that I'm really close with that come from the most sort of crime-ridden, affected communities, even in the height of what was going on with George Floyd. My friends down in Shreveport, my friends in Baltimore, they were all saying the same thing. We don't want less cops.
It's true because it really affects the minority communities. It really does,
dude. And it was all the, it was the college kids. It was the people who were watching from, who haven't really ever felt what it needs to be. I've said it a million times. I've been beat up by a cop, but I've also had my ass saved by a cop, right?
Yeah.
And I know, for me and my family, less police is not the answer.
Unfortunately, it's not.
With apologies, because look, man, there's been you have a book. There's been books written about you. So many articles. There's a movie made about your life. But if you can you take us through sort of where you were in your life with your career, with your family on 9/11, and what that day, what went down that day in your memories, and then just sort of take us through it.
Yeah, I mean, 9/11, I was living the American dream. I always wanted to be a cop. Took me 6 years to become a cop, but during those 6 years leading up to be a police officer, I met my beautiful wife, Allison. Was working in the corporate world, actually going up in positions in a good way.
Allison was.
Yeah, me and Allison, and then and I was working loss prevention, private security, which I never thought would put me in a good position, but then the Port Authority call, which was like winning the lottery. I mean, it's just a great job. You can make a lot of overtime. You can take care of your family. And again, they call us like the bodegas because we're all different commands. So each command is different. What we do at the bus terminal, they're not doing at Newark Airport.
Totally.
You can't treat people at Newark Airport like you treat people at the bus terminal.
And certainly different at World Trade.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, I was living a dream. I had got on the Port Authority January 19th of 2001. We graduated at the World Trade Center Marriott and got assigned to the bus terminal. And I started working a lot of overtime. And Allison and my dream was to buy a home. We were living in Garfield, New Jersey, and had an apartment. We had a little girl by then, Bianca. She was 4 years old. And Allison was now pregnant with our second child. And I remember talking to my mortgage guy. And he said, you're a Port Authority cop. You guys make good money. Let me see your numbers. And scrounge enough money that July, we bought our first home in Clifton, New Jersey. So now Allison's pregnant. We're moving to our new home. I'm every day getting up. I was working day tour 7 to 3. Every day was just like a dream for me to go to work. And on September 11th, it was a beautiful Tuesday morning, not a cloud in the sky. I actually was almost going to go hunting the night before and take a personal day. But I said, I'm going to save it for the rut. For those who don't know what the rut is when the deer are mating in November. And but I said I'm gonna
Kill
save my.
mother, dude. So
I
wrong.
said I'm gonna. They taste good though.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
fair
said,
enough.
you know, I'm gonna take the day and save it for November. So I went to work. It was a 20-minute drive from Clifton, New Jersey, to the bus terminal, and I remember just getting ready, walking into my bedroom like a lot of cops do, giving their wife a kiss, which I did with Allison. I kissed her belly because she was 7 months pregnant.
Mm.
I went into the next room to Bianca and I gave her a kiss. And I did that every day because of love, not because I thought I wouldn't come back home, because I never thought about that. And I went to work and drove in. And one of the things I tell people is you never outgrow high school. I don't care. You just don't. You know, I've been blessed to meet from presidents on down, and when you spend enough time with someone, some high school BS comes up. Get to the bus terminal, go downstairs, walk in, and here's high school. We're all at our lockers. These are men trusted with their guns and the law,
Yeah.
and they're busting chops, acting silly, acting stupid. Get to my locker, open it up, get our gear on, head upstairs, and to what's called roll call, where
Yeah.
we're giving out our assignments. You know, they go through any pertinent information. So my post that day was 3-5, the corner of 42nd, 8th Avenue, all the way to 41st. So I had the front of the building on 8th Avenue. And what we have at the bus terminal is actually the largest bus terminal in New York, in the United States, busiest in the world, believe it or not. So what we have in the morning is called the rush. That means that people coming from New Jersey, Connecticut, upstate New York, thousands of people coming in Midtown Manhattan. It's the rush. So we're all positioned in different areas where we can cover the whole bus terminal, help people with information. God forbid there's a medical emergency. Of course, stop any type of crime. And went out, and I remember that morning we didn't go for coffee because sometimes a couple of us would go and grab coffee, but we just went out to our post that morning. And I remember having my back to 8th Avenue, and the taxi cabs were behind me, and I'm looking at the doorways and just watching thousands of people come through. Normal day, and I remember there's an awning above me, and the awning would go out toward 42nd Street and stop, and then on the corner, I saw Sergeant Ross with Patrick McNerney, another officer, a senior officer, and another officer, Sanchez, and they're standing there. And I remember just looking over, and I'm looking at Sergeant Ross, and he's actually like following something in the air. And I couldn't hear anything with all the traffic, but I look over the corner of 42nd 8th Avenue, and for those who have never been in New York City, an intersection in New York City is pretty big. All of a sudden, I saw a shadow just cover the whole street, and Sergeant Ross is following. I didn't pay it any mind. It's New York City. Things happen. I'm like, whatever. I go back to looking at the doorway. Our radios crackled and it said 840, all units 840, which means all units come back to the police desk, which had never happened before. I mean, so I'm thinking to myself, man, they're taking us all off post at the busiest time of the day, but whatever. So I cross 41st Street and I walk over to post 5
Is that? Were you worried then? Like, are
no,
you? No,
nothing,
it's
nothing at all.
just
Just they're calling us
going
back. I don't
back.
know
Yeah,
what's going on.
yeah.
So I go back and I hook up with Dominic Pizzulo. Dominic was a great dude. He didn't want to be a cop. He came over to the Port Authority because it was a good job. He was a high school teacher in the Bronx. But in the 9 months leading up to September 11th, he understood what it meant to be part of the Thin Blue Line, be a cop. He was just a great dude. He was a weightlifter, and we hook up, and I go by Will. My mom calls me Willie, and Dominic used to call me Willie, and I would let him call me Willie because he was solid. Like he used to not like to swap days with people because if you do a swap, that means you got to pay it back and it's longer. But when I was moving, I asked him if I would swap with me, and him being a parent, he said, "I'm going to swap with you, Will. You're a good guy." He goes, "So you can move." So he made my move easier because I ended up taking like a week off to make my move from Garfield to Clifton to our new home. So we started walking back down the main of the main bus terminal there, and I remember him just saying, "Willie, something bad must have happened, man, for them to call us back." I said, "Yeah." So we head back to 9th Avenue around the corner where our police desk is. As I come around the corner, I'm looking up at the police desk that sits high, and I remember seeing the sergeants and lieutenants. By then, we have already known who our bosses are, all right? And there were people you respected and there were bosses you didn't respect. Now, one of the things being prior military, because I served 4 years in the U.S. Navy, one of the things I learned from a second class bosun mate was Smayback was his name. He said, "Listen, if something ever happens and we're in combat or some bad situations, remember, when you're going to follow somebody in that knows what they're doing,
Yeah.
because your chances of coming out are greater." And it stuck with me in life. I don't know why, but it
Yeah.
stuck with me. But one of the people up that I saw was Sergeant John McLaughlin. Now, you talk about, and this is what I found, the people that are most the badass people, they're very quiet. They don't talk. And Sergeant McLaughlin was a very quiet person. And I had been to several gun calls with him, several incidents where he was just direct in his orders. He knew what he was doing. somebody I trusted with my life. And I remember looking up and seeing his face, but I saw concern in his face. And I'm like, man, this can't be good if I see Sergeant McLaughlin's face like that. So we keep going, walk into what's called a reserve room, a break room. I came around the back corner, and there was a big TV set we had there. New York 1 was on. And here's the World Trade Center. And Building 1 has a big black gaping hole in it with smoke coming out of it. And one of the things that I remember was the academy. It brought me back to my academy days where we were taught, you guys are going to do the same job as the NYPD does or all our counterparts on the on the New Jersey side. All the departments like Fort Lee and all the departments over there. You're going to do the same jobs. What sets the Port Authority apart is all of our facilities are target-rich environments. We got hit in 93, the senior cops say, the terrorists are going to come back for these buildings. Why? Because they represent the power of America throughout the world. And when I saw that building, it's like, holy shit. What they taught us in the academy is actually happening.
You thought terrorism off the jump.
Oh, right off the bat.
Really?
And
did everybody did all
well,
the...
you know, it's funny. Not everybody did at that moment, but Sergeant Ross came in, who actually saw the plane, and he goes, "Those are terrorists." Because some people right away are saying, "Oh man, how did a small Piper plane fly in there?" And still nobody, but in my heart, I knew what it was. And Sergeant Ross said, "Those are terrorists." So at that moment, one of the things I did, we had cell phones back then, but believe it or not, we would get written up when we were found with a cell phone. You weren't supposed to have cell phones on you.
Yeah.
So I had left my cell phone in my locker that morning. So what I did was I turned around, there was a payphone. And I talk to kids today, young kids, some of them don't know what a payphone is.
Crazy,
so
right?
Yeah, it is. So I always ask, who knows what a payphone is?
Yeah.
But I tell them, I said, so I turned around, I got to the payphone that was in the reserve room because I always made it a point when I had a chance, if there was a bad incident, call Alice and say, I'm okay. Because sometimes it would make the news. I turned around, grabbed the payphone. I actually got through because the phone lines were tied up
Everything
that day.
got tied up, yeah.
But I got through, and she right away started asking me about two mutual friends we had that worked for the Port Authority at the World Trade Center. And I said, Al, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I have no idea. I just want to let you know I'm safe. And that's when Inspector Fields came in, who was the commanding officer of the bus terminal, came in the back with Lieutenant Casamatas and said, listen up, we're going to call off names. We're going to head down to the World Trade Center, which is owned and operated by the Port Authority. We have a command center there, and we're going to help our brothers and sisters start evacuating people. So I told Alice I got to go. I hung up the phone, and later she told me, she goes, that's the first time you ever hung up and not said I love you.
Wow.
And I'm a guy that wears his emotions on his sleeve. So, I have no problem telling my wife I love her.
Yeah.
And but at that point, you went into cop mode. You were like, we got a job to do.
Yeah.
Remember hanging up the phone? Dominic Pizzulo starts walking out. I start following Dominic, who was following Mike Robles, a senior cop. We didn't even wait for our names to get called. We go down, get on 9th Avenue. They had commandeered a bus. Kind of felt bad at that moment because they had all these people off the bus with their luggage. I don't even remember the bus line, but we start getting on. There's about 20 of us.
Could you, when you went out to the bus and you were on the street, were the people even up there in Midtown at the bus terminal? Was there something?
No.
Was there an awareness of what was going on downtown?
It was too soon. Nobody in Midtown really knew what happened yet.
Got it.
So we get on this bus, and I see Sergeant McLaughlin get in the Suburban next to us with Inspector Fields and another Sergeant Feely, and they start leading the way. And I remember, again, it's still high school because guys are arguing, man, that's not an airliner. It's a small plane. Phones weren't working. And we're all BSing on the bus. I mean, I'm telling you, it was casual. It's like, man, I wonder what's going on, At this point, Dominic is actually trying to get through to his family, and he cannot get through. And I remember reaching over and saying, yo, bro, can I borrow your phone? And he looked at me and said, bro, it ain't working. And I said, man, this is bad. And I remember as we got closer, we were flying. I mean, the bus driver was giggling because he's like, man, this is great because we're blowing through red lights. And, getting from Midtown to downtown could take a little while.
Yeah.
We flew that
Flying.
day.
Yeah.
We hit the Village, and that's when everybody went kind of silent. It was about two city blocks back. And we look out to the right down the street, and we see a person. He's laying in the street, a lot of blood. FDNY ambulance, as we call it, a bus is working on him. And we looked, and I'm like, that dude's dead. And it's two city blocks back. So we figured something flew back and hit this guy because you could see like concrete or something.
That was in the Village?
Yeah, it's only 2 blocks back. Yeah. The Village is right there. And the bus went silent. We went another block and we got off looking toward Vesey Street. And I remember getting off the bus. And this is something I never thought I would see. To me, it was war. It was a war zone. And being prior military and being that young kid that loved this country, watching the war movies, I never thought I would see what I saw on U.S. soil. And at that point, I knew we were under attack. We get off the bus. They tell us, hey, stage here. Because from where we were to Vesey Street was nothing but destruction. There was no people. There was papers flying. Everything you see on TV. It was just tragic. And we're standing there. As I look up, I see the big black gaping hole out of Tower 1. And I look at Tower 2, and I see the corner on fire. So in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, man, the plane blew up, hit debris. What we didn't know was a second plane had come in while we were in transit. So around that corner, there was another gaping hole, but all I saw was the corner of 2. So did Sergeant McLaughlin. So we're just standing there, and I remember just you felt helpless. Because, as a cop or a tough guy or, we watch movies and you're like, hey, you're so tough. But here we are with our uniforms on, our shields on, our gun belts, and you felt this big, man. This is how big you felt. You felt like you were in front of the ocean. Yeah. And that was a lesson for me that no matter how badass you think you are, the world is way bigger. And I remember just thinking to myself, man, we got to get up there, help people. Because this big black gaping hole, and that's when Ronnie Delmar, a senior officer who was a rookie in the 93 bombing, says, look. So I turn around and look at Ronnie. He's crying. And he goes, look, they're jumping. And when I look up through that black smoke, you can actually see people jumping. And people jumping by themselves, people jumping holding hands. And they would fall and disappear behind Building 6. And all I could think about was like, man, that's like when you throw a pebble in a pond and you get that ripple effect. And this is for all of us today. Especially like I tell people, when you're thinking of ending your life, you got to understand how many people you touch. It's like that ripple effect. When someone dies, there's a ripple effect that affects people that really love you and care about you. And I remember seeing people jump, and I'm thinking to myself, that's somebody's mother, brother, father. The list goes on. And they kept jumping. And I mean, it was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just an empty feeling like, man, I can't do nothing. And this is what I grew up wanting to be. And you feel helpless. And I remember I saw 2 people jump holding hands. And then the last person I saw, it's almost like my eyes could zoom in on him. He was blonde hair, had like a golf shirt on, kind of pinkish, And he jumped. And when he jumped out like on a cross. And they would disappear. And I'm just like, and that's when Sergeant McLaughlin came running from that debris field toward us. He had parked the Suburban up on Church and Vesey, comes running through there and says, I need volunteers. I need guys that know how to use Scott air packs. So as Port Authority officers, we're not only law enforcement, but we're the first responders of all our facilities. So we're cross-training firefighting. And I got to tell you, I hated the firefighting part of it. I hate fire. Like, I'd rather be around 5 bad guys in the dark than fire. But he ran up and he said, listen, I don't want to hear any BS. I want to know guys that are trained in it, because we have to keep our training up. And sometimes, like everything else, sometimes training slips here, training slips there. And like we were talking about shooting, right? It's a perishable art. You have to keep up on it. So training is very important. So you got to know how to put on a Scott air pack, which is what the firefighters wear. You got to know how to light it off. And I remember at that point, I can't tell you which of us volunteered first, but Dominic Pizzullo, Antonio Rodriguez, who I graduated with. Antonio Rodriguez had 4 years on the NYPD, had come over to the Port Authority for a better life for his family because the pay was better. And then myself, we just said, well, we just graduated the academy. We know how to use them. So Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. So I remember us becoming a team of 4, and we start running. And I tell people, and I speak for myself, I was scared, man. I was scared. And here I am, 33 years old, always thought I was a tough guy. But as we're running, I look back and I'm seeing the rest of the cops standing there. They were going to have a job to do. I saw firefighters being staged, not being able to go anywhere. They're listening to their supervisors. And it's just Sergeant McLaughlin, Dominic, Antonio, and me. And as we're running, I see body parts. I see parts of the plane. And I remember to myself, fuck, man, I'm scared. But I remember my oath that I took to serve and protect. And that's what I tell young men and women that want to go into being first responders. When you take that oath, just remember, when you call 911, someone calls 911, they're expecting somebody to show up. And that could be your mother, your father, your family member calling 911. You expect, even if you hate the cop's going to show up. And they have to. And I said to myself, as scared as I am, those people need us. So you took an oath. And I remember looking at Dominic's face and Antonio's, and I could see concern. I know they were scared. Yeah. We got up to building 5 next door there.
Can I just ask you one thing about that fear?
Yeah.
When you're running towards a building and you say you were afraid, you didn't think the buildings were
No,
right.
man,
I mean,
never.
like, what were you? So, like, what were you afraid
There was
of?
just a fear in me, but at the same time, I thought about that this is my job.
Right.
So it was a combination, and that's why I tell young kids today: where does courage come from? It comes from overcoming your fears, and
That's
that's
right.
what
You
I
got
had
to
to
be
do.
afraid to be
You
courageous.
had to be able to just suppress that fear.
And this hellscape that you're seeing on the ground, are there still continually? Are there people running from the building?
No,
Like
so not
that's
on Vesey Street. That was the weird thing. That's why it was very weird. There was no people on Vesey Street by the time we got there, except just destruction. And we're running, and I'm like, "Fuck, we're the only people running toward this building." People were on Church Street and they were on West Side Highway, but Vesey was just desolate, And so we just run and we get to Building 5 right next door where the entrance to the concourse. So for those that never been to the World Trade, there's two large buildings and they're connected by a mall level we call a concourse. And that's how you get to Tower 1, Tower 2, and to the elevator banks. So it's a mall with shops and escalators and elevators taking you down the PATH train and the subway. It's a beautiful place to be. You can really enjoy yourself there. And I remember just getting outside those doors, and Sergeant McLaughlin says, Jimeno, grab our memo books, which we carried, and our PR-24s, our billy clubs back in then. And he goes, run up to the Suburban and throw our equipment in there. Come in and meet us at the first E-room. E-rooms are emergency rooms. They're set up throughout the World Trade Center for first responders to be able to get their Scott air packs, their bunker coats, whatever we need, God forbid, to help people and fight whatever fires or anything like that. So I said, okay. So I ran up the block, and I remember coming around the corner, and our Chevy Suburban had taken a big piece of concrete on the front of it. And that's when I realized, hey, dummy, there's stuff falling from above. Because everything's happening so quick, it's like a bad dream. But then I realized you better get close to the building. I threw the stuff in the Suburban. When I looked down Church Street, I just saw thousands of people running out. They were being herded out like cattle. Again, not knowing Tower 2 had been hit. So I'm like, all right, come back down, get into the concourse. I see Dominic and Antonio getting gear on. I go in there. By that time, only Antonio Rodriguez put on a bunker coat. The rest of the coats were smaller, and me and Dominic had bigger shoulders. So Dominic and me, we threw on our helmets, we threw on our Scott air packs. We double checked each other, and we looked like firefighters with guns on our side. And at that moment, one of the things we said to each other was like, hey, no matter what happens, we don't separate. We stick together. We double checked each other. I was throwing on my leather gloves, my perp gloves. And in that instant, Antonio Rodriguez, who had, again, 4 years in the NYPD, was a senior guy. We used to look at him as like a fatherly figure because he was old. He was 35, just made the cutoff to come onto the Port Authority. So did Dominic. He was 35 and I was 33. It's kind of like the old men in the class. But Antonio says, don't put those gloves on, Will. If we get near the fire, they're going to melt on you. Hmm. That's the kind of people I was around. People that in the midst of chaos was still thinking. Wow. And I'm like, you're right, because if we get near fire, they're going to melt. Wow. So I took them off, and Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. We're going downstairs. So I remember, like I said, follow somebody that knows what they're doing. I remember kind of chuckling a little bit because he puts us on the elevator to go down one level. I'm thinking, well, it's a fire. I don't think we're supposed to be in the elevator, but whatever. I trust them.
And when you're in the trade center at that point, what is the concourse level looking like?
Well,
can you tell?
At that moment, I don't even look at the concourse level. We get on the elevator, go downstairs. We get to the police desk. We go into the police desk, and I see a piece of the fuselage in there that our detectives brought down. And again, my mind's like, I know a plane hit, but seeing an actual piece of a plane at the police desk was really weird. So we walk in. Sergeant McLaughlin said, guys, grab a mail cart, canvas mail cart, throw more equipment in there. Scott air packs, lights, axes, whatever. So we start doing that. And it's funny because it took years later for us to realize that the French documentary that started off with firefighters actually saw the plane hit the buildings. They break off later and hook up with some Port Authority police detectives. They're actually at the police desk when we're in there. And you actually see Sergeant McLaughlin, who had a helmet on, a yellow jacket. And at that moment, we're in there with them. So McLaughlin says, grab that stuff. So I grab the canvas cart, and we're pushing it. We get back on the elevator, come up, and to answer your question, what the concourse was like, we came out, and we're coming around. There was a couple inches of water on the deck, and that's when I saw that steady flow of people coming out of Tower 1 just helping each other. Total strangers helping each other. And I remember thinking to myself, man, if these civilians, normal people, can be this brave, us in uniform, we need to be 3 notches above them because they're depending on us. And that's why I tell people what I saw the most that day was love. I saw total strangers just helping each other. Nobody asking questions. There were people yelling. There were people injured. It was chaotic. And I remember just pushing the cart. Antonio was with me, Dominic, and Sergeant McLaughlin's leading the way. And we came around the corner. So when we came around the corner, you could have went straight to Tower 1 or made a left to go to Tower 2. We bump into another group of Port Authority cops from the PATH train, the Port Authority Trans Hudson, the train that brings everybody back and forth. And their command center is underneath the Trade Center. And I remember bumping into 5 of them. I wish I could remember the other 4 guys, but the one pushing the cart was one of our classmates, Warren Stewart. Warren was a young African American guy. He had 4 years in the NYPD. He was a superstar over there. He was a detective already. He was in narcotics, but he had a smile, man, that would light up a room. And during the academy, unfortunately, our academy is 6 months long because we have to be cops in both New Jersey and New York, so it's a lot of training. We had a lot of deaths during our academy, the 100th class. We were the centennial class. But I remember one of the highlights of our academy was Stuart and his wife gave birth to a little girl named Amanda. And he had this big smile, and he would light up a room. And always, no matter how bad the situation was, he was always smiling. Here he is, smiling again. Wow. And we're like, Stewie, what's up? He's like, yo, bro, this is bad. So we're kind of chit-chatting while the sergeant's talking. And then they're pulling away. And Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. So at that point, I just fist pumped Stewie. He had leather gloves on, the working gloves on. I said, be safe, bro. That would be the last time I saw Stewart, and the rest of those 4 cops, because they never ever found anything of them, and that was difficult. But we continued on, and that's when we met who you portrayed in the movie, Christopher Amoroso. Christopher had been recently transferred from the bus terminal where he worked with us. He was one of my OJT officers. He was a kid from North Bergen, tough guy. Like I always say, I'd go through a door with him. That's how much you trusted Chris with your life. And he came running up to us, and he had an injury under his left eye. And we're like, yo, Chris, you good? He's like, man, I'm good. Like, we got to get more people out of here. And he asked Sergeant McLaughlin, Sarge, can I join you guys? Being Sergeant McLaughlin knew him, said, yeah, let's go. So we became a team of 5. And we continued on toward Tower 2. Again, I'm never questioning my sergeant. I'm just following his lead wherever he's going. I'm pushing his cart. We get to the revolving doors. There was big revolving doors, glass doors that would allow you to get into the lobby of the tower. So the lobby of 2 I could see. There was a Ben and Jerry's ice cream shop there. We stopped right there, and Sergeant McLaughlin said, Jimeno, you stay here with this cart. The rest of you guys come down to another E-room downstairs where we're going to go see Jimmy Lynch and get more equipment. So they went down into this stairwell. And again, that fear came over me, man. I was like standing there because there was really nobody in the hallway that direction where we were. And there was just a lot of people in the lobby of 2. People had died. And as I look out, I could see cops on the other side, our cops and NYPD cops, shooting literally with their handguns the windows to let more people get out instead of doorways, to get out onto the West Side Highway. Excuse me, Liberty Street. They're actually facing Liberty Street.
Folks who had suffered from being up in the towers,
they were coming
dying,
down.
But who are you?
There were people
who had jumped.
No, there were people just in the lobby who just were dead. I mean,
that had been brought down.
I think no, and I think sometimes I couldn't tell you they were just dead. I mean, people, when that plane hit, fire came there. People were dead. It was a bad scene. I remember just thinking to myself, this is crazy. And as I'm standing there, I'm watching the cops on the other side shoot out windows so more people can get out. I see people running on top, trying to get down. And then that's when it got worse for me personally, because as I'm looking out towards Liberty Street, I see people literally see concrete falling and hearing the thump. Then I would see actually people falling and hitting other people. And it was bad because you're thinking to yourself, what are those sounds? And I could see that because unfortunately people were jumping and landing on people. And that was really difficult. And again, I'm standing there like fearful as a human being. Then all of a sudden this African-American cop walks up to me. His name was Bruce Reynolds. He was one of our cops. He was short, bald. He had a sky airpack on. He was sweating. He was assigned to the George Washington Bridge. That was a senior command. Like, you'd have to have like 15 plus years to get up to the bridge back in those days. And the only reason I recognized him was growing up in Hackensack, New Jersey, which sits in Bergen County. We butt up Fort Lee, which is Bergen County, butts up to the George Washington Bridge, one of our commands. So the Bergen Record would report on the Port Authority cops who saved people that unfortunately try to jump from our bridge because it's used, unfortunately, for people to end their lives. And I remember seeing him before I became a cop, like recognizing him in a photo with two other Puerto Rico cops who saved somebody from jumping. So that's the only way I knew him because he was at the George Washington, I was at the bus terminal. He starts walking up to me, goes, "What's up, Reynolds, GWB, George Washington Bridge?" I said, "Jimeno, BT, bus terminal." And we chit chat a little bit, and he says, "You know what, kid? It's gonna be a long day, but we're gonna get people home." And I needed that as a young cop.
Yeah.
You know, even though I was older and been in the military, I was still a rookie. And to hear a person who later I found out shouldn't have been in the building because he had lung condition from an incident before, that's the kind of American who was there that day, you know. And I always laugh because Bruce was married to an Irish woman. We think he wanted to be an Irish guy because he lived out on the west side of New Jersey where it's all like rednecks.
Yeah.
They loved him out there.
Yeah, yeah.
He was just a great guy. This guy could gel with anybody. He was a big gardener, but just a good cop. You know, we talked for a little bit, and he kind of gave me that encouragement I needed. And that's when the team started coming back up. When they started coming back, he's like, "All right, be safe," and he started walking away. And he was going to the command center of 2. Where I could see firefighters and everything like that. That'd be the last time I saw Bruce. He actually died on the initial collapse. They ended up finding him, I believe, the following February, where I told them I saw him last. And that's where there was a group of firefighters, Bruce and some other people, and that's where they found his body the following February. But again, to me, 23 years later, it's a sad thing, but it's also showing me what good human beings, good Americans are willing to do. You know, he went into that building knowing he had a lung condition, but he's like, "I'm going in there to help people." And, those are the stories we have to tell our young generation about these brave people. And what's nice about it for me is we're multicultural. It's not we're
Beautiful. It's
blue.
beautiful.
There's
Yeah.
people who are African American, Hispanic, Italian. So that's why I tell people don't get caught up in all that crazy stuff that people want to push that agenda. Look at people for who they are and what they are. And at that moment, Antonio Rodriguez says to me, "Will, let's switch spots," which becomes something critical because I said, "No, I'm okay." He's like, "No, you've been pushing from the police desk all the way here." Now you got to imagine our adrenaline's running. We have all this gear on. We're sweating. And he says a point to me, he goes, "You're not going to be any good if we get to wherever we're going and you're tired. Let me push the car now." So in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, man, teamwork, right? So I switch. So now we're going to head back down the hallway and make a left to go to Tower 1 with Tower 2 behind us. So Antonio gets behind the cart. Christopher Amoroso gets to the left of Antonio. Sergeant McLaughlin is at the 11 o'clock position. I'm directly in front of the cart, and Dominic is at the 1, 2 o'clock position. We start going down this hallway, and we happen to stop and talk to some firefighters and an EMT, I remember. We happen to stop with a doorway to our right. Now, I didn't know those buildings like John McLaughlin did. He had helped set up the security after the 93 bombing. I had been there for like 2 or 3 protests, but outside, so I don't know the buildings. And it's imperative, like anything, like if you're a police officer, you know where you work. You should know every nook and cranny where you're working because it's going to help you get somewhere faster, get you out of a situation. I didn't know the buildings. All I knew was follow Sergeant McLaughlin. So we stopped, and he's talking to these firefighters, and he kind of tells them, "Hey, man, we just came up from the B1 level. Elevator shafts are buckling." So we know that if a foundation is buckling, something's bad. But nobody ever thought, none of the extras that were standing under those towers thought these things are coming down. So the firefighter, EMT start walking away. Sergeant McLaughlin gets a radio call from the inspector, "Where are you guys?" So he starts telling them, and Sergeant McLaughlin says, "There's something wrong with Tower 2." Because, again, we don't know that Tower 2's hit, but we're seeing people run out of there, so we really don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden we hear boom. So I turn around and I look back from where we're walking through the lobby, the glass doors in lobby of 2, and I just see, bro, a humongous fireball the size of my house. And I'm not exaggerating. Everything was moving like out of a bad movie, like an earthquake movie. I grabbed my helmet and everything's shaking. And I'm standing there. Again, follow somebody that knows what they're doing. At that moment, Sergeant McLaughlin said, run toward that elevator. There's a freight elevator all right on the doorway. If we were caught anywhere else, there was nowhere to run. You're just in this hallway. So Dominic starts running. I start running behind Dominic, and I look over my left shoulder, and I can see Sergeant McLaughlin coming behind me. We hit that hallway, and I remember thinking to myself, man, Will, what'd you get yourself into? Because at that moment, I saw stuff start flickering. The lights were flickering. I saw brown stuff, which today what I know is as the building's coming down, it's pushing debris toward us. And I remember for a split second, which is so weird, I thought I saw light in front of me. Now, mind you, we're between the two towers. I thought I saw light, and I thought to myself, save yourself, run that way. And then I thought about, we promised each other we wouldn't leave each other. And I see Dominic turning to the left. So I start following Dominic. That's when I just got picked up by something. I got thrown on my back, and I'm laying on my back. And as a police officer, your first line of defense is your radio. Your communications is everything. And so I had my radio, and I had a mic here on my left lapel. So I go for my radio, and I'm yelling 813, which is our code for like, everybody come, we're in trouble. 813, officers down, we're at the World Trade Center. I must have said it 2 or 3 times, and then something hit my hand, and I lost my radio. And I grabbed my helmet, I'm holding on, because I don't even know how to describe it. Just a million freight trains coming down on you, just concrete coming in, and then something hits my helmet, literally rips my helmet off. And I had a chin strap, just rips it off. And all I'm doing is holding on, and I'm on a 45-degree angle on my Scott Air Pack. I'm holding on, and it just seemed like it was happening forever. And then all of a sudden, silence. And we're in the pitch dark. I don't know what's happening. We don't know what's happening. Nobody's saying anything. After a couple minutes, I actually look up about 20, 30 feet up. I see a light coming through. But everything's hazy, real gray, real gray. And as stuff starts coming in light, I could start seeing it. There was a little space to my right, and then to my feet, it was just concrete. And that's when I realized, hey, man, I got this concrete was about this thick running all the way down my left side. I had my right leg up in a 90-degree angle, and I can't move. The only thing I could move was part of this hand like this, and I had my right hand available. And when I look, and I see Dominic's head right by my hip, face down in a push-up position. And I remember the first person saying anything was Sergeant McLaughlin, because at this point in the initial collapse, he's stuck in a fetal position. He's actually just trapped, which I was even amazed at, because me and Sergeant McLaughlin didn't talk about a lot of this stuff till probably a couple years later. And he explained to me on the initial collapse, he was just trapped. So he was very calm. And that's one of the things I'm appreciative of, that as a leader, he kept his cool. Because you can imagine, it's kind of a hysterical situation.
Dude.
And he kept his cool, and he goes, sound off. So I said, Jimeno. Dominic said Pizzulo. And then we didn't hear Amoroso or Rodriguez. And I remember starting to yell their names. I just started yelling A-Rod's, Antonio Rodriguez's nickname was A-Rod. So I started yelling A-Rod Chris, A-Rod Chris. I must yell the name frantically for like 2 minutes. And just this calm, smooth voice, Dominic says, Will, they're in a better place. And that's when it hit us, like, man, we just lost 2 friends, 2 cops, 2 fathers, 2 Americans. Like, that was a lot to absorb. And Sergeant Glock said, okay, what's everybody's condition? I mean, he was very by the book. I said, I can't move, but I'm starting to feel pain, because I was in shock. So I didn't really feel the pain at first. Then it started creeping in. And all I can equate it to is putting like 80 Chevy Suburbans on your left side, this constant pressure. And it was indescribable. And that's when Dominic said, hey, I'm okay, but I'm stuck. So what we know today is a wall fell, hit me, and Dominic got caught between the wall and the floor. But he was impacted in the concrete and all the debris. So it took him a little bit. I had about 18 inches above me, but everything else was concrete. I mean, it was like Scott Strauss, who led my operation, says it best. He goes, when we got to you, you look like you had been dumped out of a dump truck and you were in a cocoon of concrete. That's how much concrete there was in there. How this little hole survived, we find out years later through making the movie, that the elevator shaft actually broke, and one of the elevator shaft beams actually kind of like was over us. But just imagine, within that building, that elevator shaft is like a toothpick on us. But it was enough that we still got hurt, but it was bouncing a lot of that concrete off of us.
And then above you,
it's just everything came down.
And above where that was, I mean, how many feet till you got to?
So that 30 feet up there, I mean, that was it. Everything was concrete, fell on us. I mean, these guys were on a line up there above us. And those are the questions. Like when we made the movie, what Oliver liked was, I had suggested one day, I said to him, I said, look, I can give you my perspective of what happened, but I can't tell you what the rescue workers saw. So I said, why don't we bring them in? That was what made the movie great, was, because back then, people were like, "Oh, it's too soon." Now today, something happens, they're making a TV show out of it the next
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
But back then, they're like, "Oh, it's too soon." So what Oliver liked was, hey, we have the blessing of actually the first responders who were buried in there and the first responders who responded. So Scott Strauss, Patty McGee, they actually gave their. So what you're seeing them is from what their perspective was. Because I said I can't tell you what they saw because it's buried,
Sure.
but I could tell you what I saw. So at that moment, Dominic says, I think I can get out. And it took him a little bit of time. And he shimmied literally out of the Scott Air Pack. And there was really no room. It's like 18 inches. He had to crawl over my face. And I remember just my face being smushed as he crawled over. And we kind of giggled down there, believe it or not, which is crazy. Because I said, bro, you're smashing my face. He's like, I'm sorry. So he gets into this little hole. He couldn't really stand up. And he looks up and he says, Sarge, I can get out of here. I can go for help. And Sergeant McLaughlin, again, just being something I didn't know about him was he was a former ESU officer on our job, emergency service, so a SWAT guy. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I knew about that, because he was very quiet, going back to like people that really do a lot of stuff don't talk about it. We were sitting in the reserve room way before 9/11, and he came back to have lunch there. And something came on TV like repelling, SWAT guys repelling. He goes, oh, I used to do that. I said, oh, really? I said, Sarge, when did you do that? He goes, oh, I was ESU for several years. He goes, I didn't know that about you. So I knew he was experienced. He had seen a lot of things, but just a quiet gentleman. And at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, you can't go. You need to get Jimeno out, and then you and Jimeno get me out. So I always tell people, no matter how badass you are, you're still a human being.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not everybody thinks the same, even though we wear the same uniforms, do the same job, But at that moment, I think self-preservation came into Dominic's mind. And he says, but I can go out and get help. And Sergeant McLaughlin thought, because we never thought the buildings came down, he thought it was a car bomb. He figured a car bomb happened. And why he was able to save us was because he saw something I didn't see. As that building's coming down, a debris wall's coming toward us. He saw it. That's why he told us to run. His thought was, if I get my team around that elevator shaft, hopefully the beams might deflect some of the explosions, save some of my team. That's quick thinking in the midst of like everything happening. And going back to that, I remember one of our senior cops saying, you're lucky McLaughlin was a buff. When you ask me what a buff is, somebody that's really into their work, somebody who, just engulfs all the information. That's why I tell young cops, learn as much. Stop with ego. Stop with trying to be, I always use the term from Mark Wahlberg in Mile 22. Ego is not your amigo. It's not. It's not your... put great. That ego to the side and learn. Yeah. Ask questions. Be a sponge.
Yeah.
And people always said, "How's that man see a debris wall and thinks about saving his team?"
Right.
That's what he did.
It's crazy.
So, and it was tough.
And in no time. I mean, how many seconds are you talking about?
Split second.
Yeah. Run for the
That just comes from experience, and and that's something a regular cop doesn't encounter every day. Car bombs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he would learn that through ESU. What do they do in the Middle East? They blow something out, let the first responders come again, kill them, But at that point, it was a tough conversation. It was really difficult because Dominic said, Will, I got a family at home. I said, bro, I got a family at home. My wife's pregnant. And we had a conversation. It was tough, man. It was a human conversation about, do I go up there and go for help, or do I turn around here, put my life at risk, and get you out? And Sergeant Glockson said, you need to get Jimeno out. And Dominic turned around and did what I felt was the right thing. He started digging me out. He said, I'm going to get you out, Will. And again, he was a weightlifter, a strong dude. So he's trying to get this concrete, which is not happening. Because I literally had a slab of concrete on me. And there was a piece of rebar on this side that bent over with a block of concrete at the end of it. And Dominic would try to get this thing off, but it would whip back and hit me. And this went on for a couple minutes. And I started like, bro, you're fucking kicking my ass. And we laughed. We literally laughed, and I think we needed that at that moment. We needed some relief because we were just so wound up. And he laughed, and he tried a little bit more, and that's when it got serious again. He sat down. He literally sat down on his ass, and he goes, Willie, I can't get you out, man. And that's when we hear boom again. And I'm like, holy shit, it's the same sound. Because we don't know what happened. We just heard this humongous boom, but it's the same damn boom, and it's coming. And stuff starts falling in. At that moment, I said, that's it, we're dead. So one of the things I've always done with my family is say I love you in sign language to them. And all I could think was, I'm going to die. I'm going to take my hands, cross them over here. And I hope that if they find me, they'll tell Allison this is the way I found him.
Yeah.
Because that was the first time that I thought about my family. Leading up to those events, I thought about our job, I thought about the people, and then it was about our team. And at the last moment was when I first, and I apologized to Allison at that moment. I said, "I'm sorry, baby. This is when I'm thinking about you." And I just was prepared to die, and everything just starts hitting us again, really, really hard. And unfortunately, I look over and I see Dominic, and he's trying to like kind of stand up, and then all of a sudden he turns toward me, and just this big slab of concrete comes in, hits him. I kind of see him sit down, but it's just dark. It's raining again, raining concrete. It's I can't see, and again it's all dusty, and everything stops again. It's the weirdest thing, like this horrific sound, this powerful force coming on us, hurting us, and then everything just stops completely, like silence. It's crazy. And when everything stops, I have to wait a couple minutes. Light starts coming through that hole again. And as I look over, I look at Dominic, and I can see him bleeding profusely. And I'm in a lot more pain. Now Sergeant McLaughlin is actually yelling. Because at this point, now he is being crushed to the point where his sidearm, as you police officers, our sidearms will stick off our body a little bit because of the leather. It's actually being pushed into his body. That's how much pressure is on there. And he's yelling just in a horrific way, just painful yells. And not that mine weren't, but I just remember his was just like, oh my God. Yeah. And I look over and Dominic's coughing. And I'm like, oh, Dom. He goes, Willie, I'm dying. And I said, please hold on. That's all I could say. I didn't even have the smart or the wit about me to say, hey, bro, grab your cell phone. He had a cell phone in his pocket. I never even thought about that. And I think about that a lot of times. I don't know if it would have made a difference because there was no comms that night, but he was dying. And he said, Willie, I love you. And he says to me, don't ever let anybody forget I died trying to save you guys. I said, Dominic, I would never let anybody, and I share this story with everybody every time I talk. And he actually asked for a break. He says, Sarge, can I get a 3.8? And I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck, man? You're asking for a break. And I don't know where that came from, but Sergeant McLaughlin actually stopped his yelling and said, yeah, you can have a 3.8. Oh he told me at that point, like, because we can't see him, he's like several feet on the other side of this concrete. I can hear him, but I can't see him. He knew something bad had happened. And at that point, Dominic's dying. And in his last moments, he actually rocks his sidearm out and he points to that hole that's above us. And he fires around. In a last-ditch effort, like, because we don't know what's going on, like to say, hey, we're down here. And he just slumps over and he dies right, like, from me to this window. And that was rough. I mean, I started, honestly, I remember just being hysterical, yelling, Dom's gone, And Sergeant McLaughlin, God bless him, he said, you need to calm down. You need to reserve your energy. And he said, don't look that way. Just concentrate, look straight ahead. And after a little bit, he's like, what can you do? I said, I can't do nothing. I can't move. The only thing I had exposed was my sidearm and my first initial handcuffs, my first cuffs. So he's like, well, you got to try to do something. And lucky I got a big mouth. So I just kept yelling, PAPD, officers down, PA. Again, hoping somebody above would hear us. Nothing. So I remember Sergeant McLaughlin, I'm asking him as time progresses, I said, Sarge, what are we looking at here? And he was dead honest. He's like, listen, we're going to suffer from compartment syndrome. And I never heard of that. He's like, basically, we're being crushed. Our bodies are going to start dying. The muscle's going to die. And if they don't get to us by a certain time, we're just going to die here.
And you hear him, you can totally hear him.
I can
like
hear
you
him.
And me now.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit through the concrete.
Muffled, yeah. But you can't see anything.
No, I can't see him at all. He's behind, like, you could be behind that wall. That's, right. It's all concrete. It's all crushed concrete. It was crazy.
But do you have a sense that he's in more shape than you are?
I just knew he was yelling. Really, it hurt me to hear his screams, and I would yell. We were both yelling. So I kept yelling, and then I said, I got to try to do something to get out of here. Although, just imagine Andre the Giant laying you. You ain't moving. Right. That's the way it was. So I started realizing we were swelling up. Like, my hands were starting to swell. So I grabbed my handcuffs. And by then, it's very hard to describe to people. Just imagine you just lifted weights and to peak till you're burnt out, where your arms are just hanging. That's how we felt. So for me to raise my arm and come down would take me 15, 20 minutes. That's how exhausted right away I was. And I would grab my handcuffs and I would try to hit the concrete. And it would, and after a while, I put them down and I couldn't find them because I lost feeling.
Wow.
So I kept doing that. As time progressed, uh, these fireballs start falling in, and they're falling in through this hole. And like I said, feel more comfortable with bad guys than fire. And all of a sudden, these fireballs are coming. Just imagine you're scared of fire, and they're falling in, and they're starting to roll toward you. And they started burning me. You could see where they started burning my skin, and I'm like, I'm gonna die. And I'm yelling, Sarge, I'm gonna burn. I'm gonna burn alive. He's like, just try to put him out. So I would grab dirt and try to put it out. And again, going back to the film, they were doing all the 3D diagrams as to what happened. And it answered some questions for me and John, because we kept saying, well, we don't know how these fireballs put themselves out. They were saying that there was a big wind coming up from underneath the Trade Center. I don't know if that's true or not, but somehow these fireballs would get close to me, start burning me, and then they start fading away. And this kept on going for a while. And this was really bad. Like, this is bad.
How long you under?
This is like over an hour, and these fireballs are coming in. And I know what it is. It's jet fuel. Being in the military, I was on an LPH carrier as a gunner's mate on there. We carried helicopters. So we knew what jet fuel was. We had to fight jet fuel with foam. We went through all that firefighting training in the Navy. So I knew this was bad, and you knew the smell of jet fuel. So this continued for a while. And then all of a sudden, I'm laying there, and I hear, pow, 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 pow. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And I see sparks over my head. When I look, Dominic's weapon is now firing. And the remaining 15 rounds are shooting in there, and they're flying over my head. They're sparking. So all I could do was take my hand, put it over my face, and hope that if a round hit me, my hand would stop. But I knew better than that. I mean, we were carrying hollow points. It was going to go through my hand. And I don't even know how to describe this. Like, I'm sitting there just waiting to die, and I'm still alive when the gun stops. Sergeant McLaughlin's, what's going on? I said, the fucking gun just went off. And I remember just having to calm myself down. It took a little while to calm myself down, because I'm like, I just got shot at. The round, the gun, the way it was positioned was shooting up in an angle. And how it didn't hit me, it's a miracle. I mean, they were just shooting right above me. And I was just waiting to die. And that stopped. And I had to compose myself. Sergeant McLaughlin kept telling me to compose myself and conserve energy. Because you're going to have to conserve energy. If you use too much energy, you're going to die. Your body's just going to give out. So I try to conserve energy. I kept trying to rock my gun out, because we have a 3-point system to get the gun out. And back then, we carried Smith & Wesson's 5946. They were like boat anchors. But one of the things we had, because we're at the Port Authority, is if you're ever rolling around with a perp and they grab your gun, you can dislodge the magazine. Even though there's a live round in the chamber, it will not fire those guns. So I couldn't rock the gun out. So the next big thing I could do was dislodge the magazine. So now I had the magazine. So I tried to use that as a hammer. And again, I got tired. I put it down. Then I couldn't find it. A couple hours later, I was able to rock the gun out. I was able to go. And I just remember just so exhausted. I point the gun, because you're not thinking right. I point the gun out and I pull the trigger, nothing. Because the gun doesn't fire without the magazine. I can't find the magazine. So I'm like, motherfucker. So I grabbed the gun and literally just, it became a hammer. I must have maybe only swiped 3 times. I put the gun down. I can't find it. Everything felt like concrete. They later...
And the reason why you want to shoot the gun up, because you want to let people know you're there.
Yeah, I'm trying to let somebody hear me.
Is he telling you to do that? I mean, are you guys
talking? No, he's just saying, keep trying to notify people up there. I just kept saying, PAPD officers down, PAPD officers. And there was nothing above us. Nothing. You heard nothing.
And the fact that you heard nothing, you know that nobody heard you.
Yeah, but I just kept trying, because I'm like, I got to keep trying, right? It could be somebody's got to be there, because again, I don't know what's going on above us. And so I figured if I can get and shoot the gun, maybe someone will hear us, but it was no use. And I put the gun down, and same thing, I lost it. When they found me that night, all the tools were right there. They had everything right there. I just couldn't feel it. And as time progressed, it got worse. We could smell encroaching fire, and I guess it was around, I don't know what time, but I hear gunfire above us. I mean, pow, 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 pow. Apparently, I think it was Building 7. There was an armory there. The feds had an armory there, so rounds were cooking off. So in our minds, we're thinking, oh my God, our cops are in a fight with the terrorists. We're thinking we're getting invaded at this point, because it sounds like an ongoing firefight. I remember saying the silliest thing. I said, Sarge, I said, if there's a terrorist that comes above the hole, I'm going to try to shoot him. I'm talking shit now, but I'm thinking, if I see one, I don't care if I die, if they throw a grenade, I'm going to kill one. That's my mindset. Like, we got to fight back.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm thinking, man, we're out of the fight here.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're just trying to survive. And as time progressed, it got late that night. And I remember when I think it was building 7 fell, I heard that same sound of like a building coming down, and fear just all over my body. Oh my God, but it was further out. But I'm like, something else fell, or something happened, another bomb. And I remember just as time progressed that night, and this is what I tell people, and like you said, my story, I don't feel it's my story. I think it's a human story. That's how I feel. It's just a human story that I'm sharing with people. And we were blessed to have people make that film. We could talk about that later, but I just want people to understand that I'm no different than anybody. I'm the same as you. I cry the same. I smile the same. I have the same fears a lot of people do. I'm just a human being. And at that point that night is the most important to me and pivotal point of our survival was um, I wanted to die. I just wanted to give up. I was so tired. I was in so much pain. We had lost my friends. And I made my peace with God. And I tell people I'm Catholic. I don't preach religion. I tell people I don't preach religion. But what I'm going to tell you is being Catholic, my mom always instilled 3 words in me: faith, hope, and love. Always have faith in your religion. And I tell people that are not religious, if you don't have a religious faith, that's fine. But have faith in yourself. Hope. We got to have hope no matter how bad a situation is. I've heard people say, oh, hope's a bad thing because it makes. No, hope is a good thing. As a human being, you should always hope to be better, to reach your goals, to survive, and love. Love for yourself so you can spread love to others. And at that point, I kept thinking about that. But then I said, I'm ready to die. I knew what was going to happen because I said, nobody could hear Sergeant McLaughlin. He was further back. You couldn't hear him. But I just made my peace with God that night. I said, God, thank you for 33 great years. Thank you for 6 years married to Allison, 4 years with my little girl, Bianca. My parents, thank you for bringing me this great country. Thank you for raising me to be a good person. And I kind of came to peace with, if I died today, I die as an American, as a good human being, as a cop trying to do the right thing. And I was okay with that because I felt everybody was going to go to heaven that day. Because as I call them the terrorists, I call them the cowards. Attacking innocent human beings for no reason. Wasn't even military. I felt everybody was going to go to heaven. And I said, God, I'm going to ask you for 2 things. When I get to heaven, like I said, I felt everybody was going, was one is to let me see my little girl be born. We were expecting my little girl be born in December. And I said, God, I just want to be there because I know it's going to hurt Allison for me not to be there. And the second thing, and I tell people you can laugh, I said, God, when I get to heaven, man, can I have a glass of water? I was so thirsty. It was crazy. I mean, we were caked in concrete. My lips all night long was dry. I remember at one point, there was a piece of rebar or something. I touched it and like, I think it was oil that came. I touched my lips and I was like, oh my God. I was just so thirsty.
In that conversation that you were having, that sacred conversation, you're a man of faith and you prayed a bunch in your life. Was there a different clarity in the way that you were speaking with God?
Well, I've always had a relationship. I tell my mom, my mom always taught me just be able to talk with God, and I do. And I've always learned not to ask for things that, like I watched the show Survivor, and I get really kind of ticked off when I see people talking, God help. No, this is not what you pray to God for.
Yeah.
It still is important things.
Yeah.
And I've always had a relationship. Like I learned, like if I played soccer, don't pray to win the soccer game.
Yeah.
Those are silly things.
Yeah.
I mean, have a real, and it's from my heart. And I just said, God, I said, those 2 things I ask you for, and I close my eyes. And I tell people, I don't know if it's a dream, a vision, whatever you want to call it. Some people say that's a miracle, and in a way it is. But I closed my eyes and I was going to give up, bro. And all of a sudden, the peace came over me. That's all I could say, just peace. And I see a person walking toward me, no face, a white glowing robe. Over his left shoulder was, in the distance, a pond, just tranquil, trees around it, very tranquil. Over his right shoulder was tall, endless sea of grass. And he's walking toward me, and everything's just peaceful. And as he's walking toward me, and I tell people, you can laugh. What does he have in his hand? He's got a bottle of water. I don't know if it was Poland Spring or Evian or some of that fancy stuff that they showed us in the movie. I forgot whatever the stuff is. But I wake up out of that dream, that vision, with a fire in my heart. And I just, that moment, I realize if I give up on my sergeant because nobody's going to hear him. If I give up on my family because I didn't fight hard enough to get to home to them. If I give up on my country. But at that moment, what I realized the most, and I share this with people, if I give up, I'm giving up on myself, and they win. And at that moment, I said to Sergeant McLaughlin, we're going to get the out of this hellhole or we're going to die trying. Because at that moment, I made a decision. If I die, I'm going to die on my terms. And you know who was really reinforced that for me? Cancer patients that I've met.
Hmm.
People that I've met. I think about a woman at a speaking engagement I did in San Diego, and she was a police officer. And she said to me, she didn't know who I was. I was just talking to her as a cop. And she's telling me about her cancer struggle. And she goes, I think I have about 5 months left, but I still come to these events. I still want to listen to people. I want to be motivated. And then she finds out my story, and she's just like, I can't believe it. I'm like, you motivated me. You're
Beautiful.
telling me you have 5 months to live, but yet you're going out the way you want. And that's what I felt. So I said, we're going to fight. And we kept fighting. And it was several hours more of just, I can't even describe it, horror. I mean, me and my sergeant, we prayed a lot. We talked about our families. Uh, his radio was staticky. So I said, Sarge, can you put over the radio to tell my wife, Allison, to name the baby Olivia? Because at the time, we didn't know what name we wanted for the baby. We knew it was going to be a girl. And I said, just tell Allison to name the baby Olivia, because Allison liked that name. I like Sierra and a couple other names. I always laugh and I tell people, see, women always win no matter what. Uh, so, and, you know, as a cop, I tell people, and as a veteran, you never lose your sense of humor. Don't ever do that, even through tragedy. But we talked about our families. I ended up finding out he had 4 kids. I didn't know that about him, you know. And he asked me, what's your first name? Because he only knew me as Jimeno. I knew him as Sergeant McLaughlin. That's the kind of relationship we had. I said, Will. He goes, I'm John. And we talked about it, and he kept telling me what was going to happen. He was straightforward, never pulled a punch, never tried to make me feel better. He's like, this is where we're at. This was what's going to happen. And then around 8 o'clock that night, I thought I was hallucinating. I heard in the distance, United States Marine Corps, can anybody hear us? Now, what we didn't know, we were literally in the epicenter between the two towers. They had both fallen on us. And I thought I heard United States Marine Corps. And being that I was in the Navy, I was in the Gator Navy. So ours was an LPH. So we carried helicopters, we carried Marines. So I had a great relationship with the Marine Corps. And I'm thinking, man, I said, I think I hear United States Marine Corps. And I said, PAPD, PAPD. He said, keep yelling or tap or, you know, just keep yelling. And I remember the voices getting closer and closer, and I couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, they're above me, and I didn't realize there was a small hole to my left side all night long. And they're flashing their flashlight into the hole. And I'm like, holy shit, they found us. And I'm like, I'm right here because I could move this hand. What I didn't realize, again, going back to my thirst, was we were caked in concrete. They couldn't see me because I looked part of the building. So they're like, I can hear you, but I can't see you. And they're only about 20 feet up, and I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, what the do you mean you can't see me? I'm right here. I'm waving my hand.
Because you could see the light.
Well, it's shining right on me.
Could John see the light?
No, John was in the dark the whole time. He was in the pitch black. I mean, till it got darker, I still had kind of light coming in. And then, unfortunately, I could see fire above me, and that was kind of lighting things up. So just really dingy environment. Really bad. Like I said, I wouldn't want to see anybody else go through that. And it took a little bit. Then I realized I got to do something. I don't know how I mustered enough spit. I put enough spit right here that it changed my coloration. And I went like this, and he says, I got you. And it was a Marine, Dave Carnes and Jason Thomas, along with a civilian. And he goes, we got you. So at that point, they sent the civilian what they call the pile, down the pile, and he bumped into NYPD ESU Truck 1, which is their emergency service SWAT team. These guys started coming up, and I heard them above me on my right side. And next thing you know, man, they had to burrow through. They couldn't come down that hole. They had to come in, and Scott always does the best story because he tells how he had to, like a groundhog, come in from our right. They had to find an area to get in. And he said basically that just imagine the room behind under this chair. That's what these guys were crawling through one at a time. And I remember Scott saying, Scott Strauss, NYPD. I said, Jimeno, Portori. I said, right away, I started saying, you got to get to my partner. I felt I was younger. I felt that they needed to get to Sergeant McLaughlin. But when they get to me, I was like, you got to get to my partner. You got to get to my partner. And they're like, no, we got to get to you. Because now I'm not saying sergeant. I'm saying my partner. Well, they're thinking my partner's Dominic. So they see Dominic and they're like, yo, this guy's, he doesn't know where he's at.
Yeah, yeah.
And I start hyperventilating. I start almost to a point I almost gave myself a heart attack. Scott says, you need to calm down. Because at that moment, I felt like I'm done. I'm exhausted. I want to give myself to these guys. And Scott made it clear, you need to keep fighting. I cannot help you if you don't help yourself. And that's a very important lesson I learned. And I share this with young police officers. If, your mind, there's a saying, discipline the mind, the body will follow, is so true. We've had police officers who die from, say, a stabbing or a gunshot wound, not because of the wound, it's because of their mind. They'll actually literally give up. Yeah. And you have to keep fighting. I realized that. He gave me a bag to control my breathing. And I remember the first time he touched me, I yelled incredibly. It was so much pain. I yelled. And I remember him backing off. And at that moment, I thought to myself, yo, Will, you got to eat this pain. Because this guy, every time he touches you, he's backing off. And we're on a time thing here because I don't know how much longer my body's going to last or Sergeant McLaughlin. And then I don't know what's going on up above because people are yelling some really bad things up there. There's like an encroaching fire. So I just started eating the pain. He starts working on me. They work on me in 3 hours. For those 3 hours, it was really bad. And during probably the first hour and a half, Sergeant McLaughlin doesn't make a peep. And I'm yelling, you got to get my partner. I keep yelling. Scott's like, man, you got to just shut up, let me work. They couldn't get me out. They had doctors standing by above us to actually amputate our legs. Wow. And I'm like, at one point, I'm looking up there. I'm like, Scott, I call him Strauss. I said, just cut my left leg off. So the Marines above, there were unique guys. They were both Marine reservists. One was Dave Carnes, who literally came down from Connecticut, put on his greens and came down. And another one was Jason Thomas, who literally came out of nowhere from Long Island and responded. And they broke through the lines that night because they stopped all first responders coming in because the buildings were still falling down. Talk about true heroes. And a civilian. I don't even know where this guy came from. So, but Dave Carnes is a unique cat. So when I said, cut my leg off, Scott said, what do you want me to cut your leg off with? And Dave Carnes, you know what a Marine K-bar knife is? Nope. All right, so everybody should know what a Marine K-bar knife is. It's a bad knife, right?
Straight up, yeah.
Next thing you know, Dave Carnes throws this Marine K-bar knife and says, use this. And I laugh about it today because Scott told me, because I'm still not in a race state of mind. He goes, Will, you actually told me to cut your leg off with that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for real? And I'm like, but I didn't care. I'm like, just cut my leg off.
You got to go
get
see your
me
daughter
out.
get born, yeah.
Well, and I thought about my sergeant. I said, they got to get to him, man. Yeah, and I can live without a leg.
And they still don't know that sergeant exists.
No. Soon after that, that's when Sergeant McLaughlin, after like an hour and a half, bro, just silence, says, how's it going out there? Holy Scott, Chuck, Patty, like, who the fuck's that? Like, just imagine an abyss. Yeah. You're working on one person and a sound. And I said, well, that's my partner.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're like, who is that? I said, that's Sergeant McLaughlin. Now, here's a little saving grace that made me have a pickup was the NYPD and the Port Authority cross-train together. So our ESU units cross-train. John McLaughlin knew Scott Strauss and Patty McGee. They actually have mutual friends on Long Island. So when I remember Patty McGee, who's as Irish as they come, he's actually named Patrick McGee, born on St. Patrick's Day. When you talk about a typical NYPD cop, this guy's it. Yeah. He says, hey, Irish eyes, because John's McLaughlin, but he's part Italian and part Irish. And I remember saying, these guys know John. That made me feel, okay, these aren't just brothers in blue. They actually now know somebody. Yeah, and that gave me a little bit more hope. And they're like, we're going to get to you, John. We got to get Jimeno out first. But the whole time down there, to show you the courage of these people, there was an encroaching fire. I can't tell you how many times they were ordered to leave us. And Patty McGee basically told them, go f*** yourselves. If they're going to die, we're going to die with them. That's the kind of guys that were in there. And I remember at one point, they couldn't break the concrete off me. They had to bring in a tool. And I remember Scott putting the tool in, and he said, listen, I'm going to use this tool. And if everything falls on us, there's hundreds of people up there ready to come in. And that was a very, I got to tell, we were all just waiting to die. And he runs the tool and it cracks the concrete. Then it took a while longer for them to get me out because my left leg was wrapped in rebar. And these guys really fought hard. They finally were able to free me. They put me on a stretcher. And I remember literally coming out the hole. And I said to John, I said, Sarge, hold on. They're going to get to you next. And when they popped me out of the hole, that was the first time I cried that night. I didn't cry when I got hurt. I didn't cry when the guys died. I cried because they pulled me out of the hole, and I look up and I was like, where is everything? And a firefighter said, it's all gone, kid. Because I could see the moon. I could see a clear sky and a lot of smoke, but I didn't see the buildings. And that's the first moment I realized what happened. And I felt like we failed. That's why I cried, because I said, there was a lot of people down there. And I just felt we failed. Mm-hmm. And they started running me down the line. I was just starting to grab patches. NYPD, Port Authority, FDNY, they were Jersey. It was like they told me about 700 people. Wow. They got me down to the ambulance. I remember they put me on the ambulance. Bruce Kent, the Port Authority officer, was on the ambulance with me. He took my necklace that my mom had given me, a gold shield, not a gold shield, a silver shield with my shield number on it from graduation. Took my shield and my ID cards. They whisked me to the hospital. The second time I cried was when I got to Bellevue Hospital, because now this is like close to midnight. They found me at 8, got me out about 11. Then by the time they got me to the hospital, it was almost midnight. And I see all these doctors and nurses standing around. I'm thinking to myself, as a first responder, when there's a bad situation, you hope someone will take a peek at you because you were trying to do the right thing, especially when there's mass casualties. And there was nobody. And I said, where is everybody? And they're like, you're it. And that's the pain of that still hurts me today. I feel like we didn't get enough people out. I know that they say it was the biggest rescue, but there was too many people. A lot of people today. I just recently talked to a woman who her brother died as a firefighter from 9/11 illness, and I know the pain is real. And I just felt like we failed. And they whisked me into the emergency room, and there's people buzzing all over me. And the only thing I remember was a nice lady saying, "This is gonna hurt," and I'm like, "Okay, what? I don't know." And she shoved the catheter in me. That woke me up. I was like, "Whoa!" I remember that, like, "Oh my God!" And they put me into a room. And talking about Fairbanks, one of the cops, the senior cop, he was actually there when they put me into that room. And our bodies had swelled like the Michelin Man. So they had to cut me from my upper left thigh all the way down my ankle, and he was standing there. And they took a knife and just zipped me down. And this is a hardcore cop who's seen a lot of things. And Jeff said, I had to leave the room, Will. The wall was white and it blew up with red. And he goes, wow. I had to leave. I couldn't stand and see that. Wow. I had 18 operations in 2 weeks. Sergeant McLaughlin came out the next morning at 7 a.m. He was the last person to be pulled out. We're the only 2 to survive from underneath the trade center. We didn't find that out till the following year when we went to go see NYPD to thank them. We were in wheelchairs, and they said, "Do you guys know you're the only 2 from under it?" There was one more person pulled out after us. That was the next day at noon. Mrs. Guzman, who was a Port Authority employee, was stuck topside, literally her head. She has a great story too. But we're the only 2 to survive from underneath it. There's about 18 of us that survived after both towers fell. But what I look at it today is I tell people is, look at the human spirit. Look at the strength. 18 of us survived after both those buildings fell. I still look at it today and I'm like, I don't know how I'm here. I like to credit to just the pure will of my faith, hope, and love. But as a human being, what I share with people is that no matter what tragedy you go through, if you're in the middle of that tragedy, keep going. Don't stop. Because I am no different than anybody else. If you put your heart and soul and everything you have to make it home, you can do it too. And it's a lesson that I want people to understand. And most importantly, I have so many people come up to me and they say, like you said, it's an incredible story, right? But we all have incredible stories. And what I tell people is this. People will say, I can't think of anything worse than 220 stories falling on you. And I said, sure you can. You lost a child. You found out you got cancer. It could be just a child saying, I don't think I can get over this midterm test. Mm-hmm. We all have our own World Trade Centers in our lives. Mm. It's what we do with ourselves to overcome those World Trade Centers. So I tell people, I have an incredible story. And again, it's a human story, but things that happen in your life are just as important, because people like to kind of put things, oh, well, this is more important than me. No, we're all important, and your story is important. So what I'm saying to anybody listening is, maybe you're going through a hard time, and maybe you say, well, it's not as bad as you, but yeah, it is. And you might feel it that way. So that heavy weight you're carrying, it's what you do with yourself. How have you overcome that weight? Because I had to do it too. You know, not only surviving that night, but more importantly, the aftermath
Right.
was even worse.
The sort of ability to say, hey, look, everybody's going through it, and this humility and this my story is my story, but we need to go be there for everybody, and there's pain and there's suffering everywhere. Can you just talk about? I mean, you didn't feel that on September 12th, right? I mean, how did you get to that process? Can
Yeah,
you
well,
talk about
it
that?
was an evolution because I mean, in the beginning, it was just fighting for our lives. We weren't out of the woods. You know, that night I actually flatlined twice on the table. They later told me that I actually died twice, and then it was a long recovery period, uh, and it was a lot of PTSD that happened.
How did that manifest itself? The PTSD,
It manifested in itself that I didn't even know I had it. Before I like to think that I'm that positive guy sharing a story of helping people. I was in a bad place. I needed help, and I didn't realize. And God bless my wife, Allison. She said it. She goes, "You had PTSD from the moment you got home. I wasn't walking. I was in a wheelchair." She goes, "You were somebody else." And I didn't know it because in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm okay. I got to deal with the death of my friends and everything. Mine was anger. Mine was anger, and PTSD manifests itself in all different depression, anger, anxiety. Mine was anger. I was angry that I couldn't do enough. I was angry to see my friends die. I was angry to see our country attacked. I was angry that my life was going to be totally different with the injuries I sustained. I have drop foot because my nerves were severed. I have my left leg looks like a shark devoured it. And it manifested itself in a bad way. I was fortunate enough to be there with Allison to see Olivia be born. She was actually born on my birthday. Allison scheduled C-section, and she was born November 26, 2001. It was a great day. And I tell people, you look at my life back then, people from the outside, they say, well, this guy survived 9/11. He's home with his beautiful wife, his 4-year-old little girl, and he has a new baby. What could be better? It was bad. I mean, our home that we love so much was what I realized for Allison, not a good place because of me. Again, I was snapping at people. I was nasty, not even realizing it. And it was the triggers were just stupid stuff. And this went on for a while. And I wouldn't, Allison would say, maybe you need to talk to somebody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. They forced me to talk to the police counselor and our PBA counselor, but I just felt like I was going around in circles. I was like, well, there was just a lot of hate. You sit down and talk, and I'm like, this is silly. What am I talking
can you
about?
explain that mindset? Like, what are the voices in your head saying?
Just like this is bullshit. Why am I wasting my time here? Uh, and then there was thoughts about ending my life. And this is things that this is of course way after uh, 9/11. I'm thinking, I just don't want to live. There
And
was times that I was
because you
just
were
like,
engulfed in anger, because of helplessness,
I
because of
felt guilty. I had a lot of survivor's guilt. Why am I alive? Why isn't Chris home with his wife and Dominic home with his wife and Antonio home with his wife? Why am I alive? Um, I actually wished that I had died. I wish that, why do I got to carry this burden? These were good guys. They're good friends of mine. They were exemplary police officers. Why am I alive? And it was difficult. And Allison took a lot of the brunt. And I remember just not knowing what to do. And then the one incident that changed my life was probably a year later, and I come home. At this point, I'm now walking with a cane, and I come home and I want to turn the TV on, and I can't find the remote, and I'm yelling like, "Where the fuck's the remote?" Um, and I remember they couldn't find the remote fast enough, and I also wasn't moving fast enough, and I picked up a shoe, and I was gonna throw it at her, just freaking wing her in the head. That's how angry I was. And as I was about to throw the shoe at her, mind you, I have a an infant child there. I have my older daughter looking, and I caught myself like, holy shit, what are you about to do, bro? This is not who you are. And it goes back to my upbringing. I'm like, this is not who your parents raised you to be. And thank God I caught myself because, I hate to say it, leading up to it, I probably shook my kids, did nasty things, not knowing. And then Allison would yell at me. But it was a lot of pressure on her. And I remember just dropping the shoe and getting in my truck. And like I said, I'm a big bow hunter. I drove up to the country to a public piece of land where I hunt. I sat there in this field. Actually, the field I would have been on if I took a P day on 9/11. I
Hmm.
sat there and I was just thinking, and I realized, I said, Will, there's something wrong with you, but I don't know what it is. And I was just down, and I drove back home, and I went and I saw Allison. I said, baby, I'm sorry. And I walked into Bianca's room, my little girl, and I said, she was 5 now. I said, does daddy yell a lot? And she said, daddy, you scare me sometimes.
Hmm.
And I realized I got to do something. Because at that moment, what I realized is if I'm not a good husband, a good father, what's basically happening is those terrorists through me are touching another generation of
Fuck yeah.
Americans. And it's no different than someone who was brought up in an abused family. They sometimes become abusers. An alcoholic father or mother, they become alcoholics. A drug abuser, they become. So you start realizing that as parents, we really have a large impact on our children. And I, at that point, started basically a war with myself on trying to better myself. So I started going to more therapy. And this is what I tell people, even if you're brave enough to go to the first therapist, you might not like them. Therapists, a dime a dozen. They're like car salesmen. You got to keep trying to find someone, even if it's not a therapist, that you feel comfortable talking to and try to work things out. And it's not going to be easy. This is what I tell people. It is not easy. So many people give up and then they do the most horrific thing, which is take their own lives because they don't realize what they leave behind is emptiness. I wrote that book we'll talk about with Dr. Michael Motes, and he sees that from his patients is just the emptiness when someone commits suicide. And again, I thought about it several times. And, one day I remember something happened, and Allison, I went into the closet, and Allison thought, I'm not coming back out. And I swore to myself I would never do that again. And through therapy, it started helping me. And I think what helped me the most was I was talking to a good friend, Debbie Mandel, who died from 9/11 illness, unfortunately. She used to come down and talk to the cops and firefighters at midnight. She ended up contracting 9/11 illness. But she made, I think, what really was a turning point for me. One day she said, we come here and we talk, uh, and you're still angry. And she goes, what you're going to have to realize is you're never going to get rid of PTSD. You'll have to learn to live with it. That means when you start feeling that anger coming on, you have to be able to take that negative energy and put it somewhere. So I started doing with being able to walk, be able to hit a punching bag, to let that anger, that energy out in a certain way. Now, again, mine is anger. I can't even imagine what someone who goes through depression or anxiety is.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out. And it's no different than someone who's recovering alcoholic or drug abuser. You're never going to get rid of that. It lives with you. So I started learning that I have to learn to live with my post traumatic stress disorder. And I had to start learning the signs of it. And Allison was a great help. She's like, you're getting angry over the stupidest thing. It could be watching the news, like watching things that, I'll be honest with you, the Port Authority, we lost 37 guys, and then they're doing certain things that at the police department that made no sense. We just lost 37. You guys aren't doing this. It can happen again. And started getting me angry. And she'd be like, shut the TV off, go for a walk, do that. Until this day, at times the PTSD does rear its ugly head, but I have to catch it. And I'm way good at it. Thank goodness.
Hmm.
But you can talk to people who have PTSD or alcohol or drug. There's times that shit comes back at you. And the trick is learning to live with it. The day I get rid of 9/11 is the day they bury me. That's when it'll be over. Just like all the men and women who have fought and died for this country. I look at, lately I've been watching a lot of Netflix. And Apple TV, I watched The Pacific. I just finished watching Band of Brothers again. And it reminds me that I'm not the only one. These men who fought had to live with these things, but they were able to live. And some of them have taken their own lives. But I choose to not do that because then I dishonor Dominic, Chris, Antonio. I want to do good by them with the gift that I have to make them proud of me living my life. And as much as I would love to be able to have them share everything that I've been able to see with my kids, I know that if I'm doing right, I'm honoring them, and I'm honoring my life, because as a gift, it'd be a shame if I did do something to dishonor the gift that I got of a second chance at life.
Yeah. And in writing the book and doing the movie, do those things, I imagine those things are enormously, I mean, I imagine they're enormously hard, but they're also enormously helpful, correct?
Well, the movie, I'll say helpful today. I mean, I don't know if you even knew about this, but we didn't want to do the movie. The movie was brought about because we had a Philadelphia newspaper reporter. John asked me, he's like, this reporter wants to do a big piece on us, and he was still in rehab. I came in to see him. We were wary of that because we didn't want the story. Because again, and back then I said, everybody knew Hollywood could fuck something up, right? They're gonna make some crazy, hero movie, and that's not what we wanted. So we sat down with this reporter, and then what happens is this beautiful woman named um, Deborah Hill. So she produced and was one of the forefront women in Hollywood to make movies. She did Escape from L.A., Escape from New York, the Halloween series, The Fisher King. And she was just a small woman, and she had a meeting with us. And they reached out, and the reporter from the Philly said, "This woman, Deborah Hill, wants to talk to you guys about a movie." And we're like, right off the bat, I didn't really say anything. John was like, "I don't think this is a good idea." So we sit down with Deborah, and she was so sweet. She's originally from down Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and she starts talking to us and saying, "You know what this film does, right?" So she's explaining to us, because we're really not thinking about it, is we need an inspirational movie to show the good of that day. Because, of course, our movie, it doesn't show the terrorists. It shows about how we came together as Americans, how people put their lives on the line, and that people survived. And people, were able to uplift people through that story. So it was a long process. We still kind of like, so she introduced us to Michael Schamberg and Stacy Scher, the producers, and Moritz, who was another producer from Germany. And we met with Deborah, Stacy, and we felt comfortable. Deborah and Schamberg did the, Pulp Fiction, Get Shorty, and they made us feel comfortable. So as the process began, we started trusting them. We talked about what was going to be happening, and then they brought in Oliver Stone. And Oliver, I remember coming to my house, and we sat a meeting, and it was interesting because we went into my office, and I have a lot of memorabilia from 9/11. I have dog tags of my friends that died, and the only thing I said to him, I said, "Look, we're not doing this movie to be rich or famous or anything like that. Why don't you just tell the truth?" And I said to him, I looked him right in the eye. I said, "Just like you went through Vietnam, because a lot of people don't know, Platoon is about
It's a
Oliver.
story, yeah.
I tell young kids today they don't even know who Oliver Stone
Right,
is.
right. It's crazy.
But I tell them, I said, you remember losing your fellow soldiers? We just want to honor them and tell the story, and we want to let people know that we're very fortunate because thousands of people died that day, and there was thousands of families sitting at home like our wives waiting for that phone to go off, and there's hope that some people will survive." And he said to me, he goes, "Will, I forgot, Vietnam." And he goes, "It's just a human thing that you kind of separate that." And he thanked me. And he said, "I give you my word, I'm going to do right by it." And he did. He did. Michael Stacy, uh, Oliver Stone, all the actors honored uh, that story. And today, I can't even tell you the amount through Facebook and Instagram, people from around the world, young kids that weren't even born,
Yeah.
watch that movie and they're inspired and they're motivated. And I said that to Oliver because we were at the 2000, uh, 2007, just before it happens here in New York, before the Oscars. That year, actually, King of Scotland won the Oscar. We were there, and I said, Oliver, you might not win the Oscar, but that particular day I had been bow hunting in the morning, and a kid that lives on the property came up to me. He's 10 years old. He said, "Mr. Jimeno, I heard you going to a big thing tonight." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to this party, all these celebrities there." And he goes, "Is the director going to be there?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Can you tell him from a 10-year little boy that I watched the movie and it really taught me to be a better person, a good
Wow.
American?" And I went that night and I said to Oliver,
Wow.
I said, "This is what this child said." And then they let us talk up there. And I remember everybody was there. I mean, Bloomberg was sitting with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I said, "Look, I'm just a cop. The gift that you guys as filmmakers have is that you can actually motivate, inspire people, tell a good story." And that's what Oliver did for us. And I told him the story about that 10-year little boy to everybody.
That's cool.
And people came up to me. Clint Eastwood was like, I don't get starstruck after 9/11. I really don't. I just, because I realized what's important in life for me. but I got starstruck that night. Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood, man.
You know, I'm like, Jesus. I said, Mr. Eastwood, you're the John Wayne of my generation.
Yeah.
And he walked up to me and he shook my hand. And after I said that, and he goes, you know, what you said is so true. Because you're not going to go into the grave with Oscars. You're not going to go with money. You're not going to go with anything. It's what the legacy is. For me, it's always how I raise my children. But most importantly, I want people the day I die is a small percentage of people, because we get forgotten, is to say, hey, you know that guy Jimeno? He showed me a way of living a better life. And if I can do that, just like as a cop, you went to work every day, you're not going to save the world, but if you can help one person, then you're doing something. And that's what I try to inspire people with, you know, and that's what the movie did. So I always say thank you to you, to everybody who was part of that film, because I cannot express to you the impact that I get from people from around the world who weren't even born. Yeah. So the movie did its job, and it's to inspire people. And I mean, I can't even tell you, from France, from Spain, from Portugal, young men and women who actually don't see it as an American story, but a human story. Right. And that was why I'm grateful the film was made. Because again, there was a point that me and Jon said, we're not going to do the movie. And it was through Deborah Hill being the sweetheart who unfortunately died of cancer during the film. She never got to see the final product. And she would say that to us. She goes, you and Jon inspire me to keep fighting. And this poor woman went through double amputation before she died to finally brain cancer.
Wow.
And I just said, you know, if we could make her life a little bit better because of what happened to us, then there's a reason for us to have survived. We can't give up on humanity. And I've always believed that there's more good in this world than bad. Absolutely. You know, that's why I love the quote by Edmund Burke that I preach a lot. You know, all that is needed for evil to triumph is for good men not to do nothing. And I tell everybody today, there's good men and women. And it's that, I think I was thinking about that on the way over here, that the sad part is there's more good in this world. I don't care what anybody says. Totally. But it takes a tragedy for us to see it. Yeah. You know, even after 9/11, you had the Boston bombing. People stepped up. Yep. You had the floods in Texas where the redneck Navy came out. You're talking Hicks from Mississippi, Louisiana, who most people say, oh, they're racist toward black people. Well, they're out there saving people. Mm-hmm. I see the best when bad times happen. Mm-hmm. And I always equate it to, like, you know how you feel healthy all the time and then you get the flu and then you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to be healthy. And then we take it for granted.
That's right.
But even in New York City, in the state we're in, when something bad happens, regular New Yorkers, regular people are going to step up and help. Mm-hmm. You know, I know today we get mad because some people, instead of helping, they're, with the phone.
Yeah.
But they're still good people. And I tell my kids that, just remember, be smart, keep your head on a swivel, learn how to take care of yourself. But I guarantee you, when you're in trouble, there's going to be someone that's going to step up to help. And that's why I tell people I still have faith in humanity. And like I said, sometimes, I get down and I watch the news. I'm like, oh my God. But this country, no matter what happens, is more united than divided. Understand there's, unfortunately, and I'm not a conspiracy person, but there's people with agendas that are very powerful. But at the level where normal people are, they care about each other. Yeah. They truly, truly care about each other. That's why you'll see when an event happens, people donate money. Maybe they can't get there and do it themselves, but they'll donate, mm-hmm. or they give their time. And that's what I want people to understand. You know, don't allow the bad to take over the good. There's more good in this world than bad.
What is sort of your philosophy on being a father? Is it exactly what you just said?
Really just try to instill good in them, be a good example, most importantly. And that was rough for me. I mean, because I've had to talk to my girls about what PTSD was and some of my actions that were not great. You know, I have to remind them, like, you know, when Dad grabbed you by the scruff when you were like 6 years old and acted like I was going to punch you, you know, that was an effect of PTSD. And that I still have regret with, you know, mm-hmm. that I remember one day I was driving and Olivia, who is my little mini me, she was still in a car seat. She was acting up. I literally turned around and grabbed her like a thug. And I remember Allison yelling at me. It's one of the memories I retain that I hope they'll end up forgetting. But I had to have some conversation with them. But most importantly is being a good example. Going forward, that to not just take things for granted and act like life doesn't matter. I want to be good examples for them. Even today, I strive to be a good example. Hard worker, work hard. They both have had challenges in their lives where they had to fail, which is a good thing because that's where we learn success is through
Sure,
failures.
absolutely.
I can't protect them all the time, so I just try to make sure. And I'm blessed. They both are great young ladies. They're good examples of our family, of what people should be. I'm always blessed when someone says, you raised two good girls, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah,
That's the biggest compliment that I can
absolutely.
receive. And people use the word hero. I wasn't a hero on 9/11. I was a cop doing my job, what I was expected to do. The only hero I want to be to is to my two girls. I'd like to be an inspiration to people, but the only hero I want to be is to my two girls.
What are you most proud of in your marriage? What are you any frustrations or regrets?
We fight every day, and I don't even know what we fight about.
Yeah,
We really do. I tell us, I don't know what the hell we were fighting about.
yeah.
I think it's summed up in one word that I recently talked to somebody in the outdoor world who lost their loved one, and that was Jim Shockey. I don't know if you know who Jim Shockey
I
is.
don't.
You'll ask all those guys. Jim Shockey is a very famous Canadian hunter, and he lost his wife last year. And I recently talked to him at the SCI convention, and I was telling him that when I was gonna die, I told God, I hope that Allison will find somebody that will love her and love my children like I, because that's what love is. That night, I said, God, let her find somebody. I don't want her to grow old alone. And I said, that's true love. And I saw Jim Shockey at the show recently in January. And I said, Mr. Shockey, he kind of knew my background. I said, I want you to know that I know your wife would probably want the same for you. That she loves you so much that you're going to go through a grieving period. Understand it's okay to love again. I'm telling you this because I just want happiness for people. And I said, you have such a special marriage like I have. And he said, Will, I had a fairy tale. And that's what I have. I basically have a fairy tale marriage. I have so many of my friends have got divorced. And one of my friends who's a trooper said to me, I want what you have. And I said, I'm very blessed. A, there's a lot of love. B, there's a month, a lot of respect. And C, communication. I'm able to put my ego aside when I'm wrong, and sometimes it might take me a little bit. I'm able to say I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And she's just been a backbone. You're talking about a woman who was 7 months pregnant when the attacks happened, had to take care of the family while I was hurt, gave birth, continued to work for a while till she finally came home, then had to put up with me. And something very important that's another reason that I learned through the book was secondary PTSD. I didn't realize that, woe is me, I have PTSD. But what I'm doing to my family is called secondary PTSD. My wife was going through, she's going through PTSD as well. Because everyone focuses on the person that's injured, but your family is going through it too. And that was something I learned through writing that book. So for me, it's those three things: love, respect, communication. But honestly, John, for me, it's a fairy tale. To have a woman support me through what I've been through, what I continue to do. I get frustrated sometimes because I can't work because of my injuries. And now I'm at a point where both my girls, my oldest graduate from Auburn University, Olivia, my baby's going to graduate this year from Auburn University.
Wow.
And I have a lot of time on my hand. Now, luckily for me, I do a lot of stuff in the outdoor world.
Sure.
But there's times like I feel like I'm wasting away. And that's something I have to deal with all the time. So through speaking engagements and then just being able to do the outdoor activities I do, it keeps me motivated because the worst thing you can do is be stagnant. Like feel like you have no purpose. And I tell everybody, you have to step out of your comfort zone and find something. So for me, luckily, I have a supportive wife who, that's one of the things my friends, they're like, man, she lets you hunt all the time, but she got me into hunting. So I was a Spanish kid from Hackensack, played soccer, did karate, and then she put a bow in my hand and she regrets it. But her support for me has been immense. And I wish that for everybody. I wish that everybody could find someone that will love them beyond words. And that's what I have. Like I said, Jim Shockey, I thought that was the way I could describe my marriage is it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Oh man, it's I'm just really grateful you came and did this with me, man, and I have so much respect and admiration for you, man. Not just for everything you share, but just what you're doing now, and to me, as far as a purpose, it's like, man, you have one.
Well, you know what? It wasn't me. It was people around me. When 2 years after the attacks, my next door neighbor in Clifton asked me to come speak to a school. And I didn't. I'm like, what do you want me to talk to? Just your survival would help you, because the kids at the time back then were scared to get on planes. So I put my uniform on. I still wasn't walking great. I went in and I shared the story, what the movie's about, what I've talked about. And it grew from grammar school to high schools to colleges to military groups. So I do speaking engagements today. I don't do it for a living. People call me and I pick and choose. But the thing that it helped me with my PTSD was in 2009. I'm speaking at Fairleigh Dickinson University. They brought me in there for a program called Latino Promise to talk to a lot of Latinos, and the war was really raging bad. And I would always ask, who's been in theater? And the reason I say that is because I don't want to ask people if they've been in combat, because there are people who serve in very important roles, but they're not in a combat zone. And then there's those people who have been in combat. And I remember that year, a bunch of Marines raised their hand, and I said, right. And I saw one, and I did my speech. I talk about PTSD because I want to share with them that you went through something tragic and that you need to have a good life. And at the end of that speaking engagement, this one Marine walks up and he shares a story with me that's very moving. And, he saw his whole team get killed in Fallujah. So, and I'm used to that. They come up and say things. The next year I go back to this college again. They ask me back. At the end, I do Q&A. At the very end, this young man gets up and says, I just want to tell everybody that basically something bad happened in his life, and he thought about what I said, and that's basically helped him live. And I remember it floored me. Like, I didn't know I had that kind of impact.
Yeah.
And he's the one that walked up and says, you need to write a book to help our brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And it took me 10 years because, again, I would talk to the different companies that, like, we made a movie. And I'm like, it's not about the movie. It's about the after part.
Absolutely.
So finally in 2020, I wrote a book with Michael Moats, who his brother I met through hunting, but he's a doctor of psychology and works out of Colorado Springs with a lot of military. I said, can you help me write this book? Because I'm not smart enough to, I can talk, but I can't write. So he wrote the book. And what we did was the book goes into depth with PTSD, what I went through. And most importantly, has exercise in there. So if you're a person who's going through a bad time and don't want to talk to somebody, we have exercises in the book to help you live one more day, one more week. But most importantly about that book, which is called Sunrise Through the Darkness, was I didn't know. I made it to help first responders and military. I started getting feedback, and I get a note from a doctor that says, I just want you to know that your book has helped 3 of my patients.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what kind of doctor are you? She's like, I'm a doctor that deals with women with postpartum. We've had women that have killed themselves because of postpartum, but 3 women that were suicidal said your book helped them. I'm like, John, I'm like, postpartum. So what I'm trying to tell people is everybody's story is important. So share it. So I shared it through that book, Sunrise to the Darkness, and then I did the kids' book to help kids today understand that what you're going through, we all went through.
Yeah.
But to continue to live your life and aspire to your goals, and you're going to meet some bad challenges, but if I can achieve my goals, why can't you? Yeah. And that's the most important thing I want people to understand today is I want to be an inspiration to people say, you know what? That guy's no different. If he could do it, why can't I? That's right. And that's what I want to do and help people with.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. I'm really grateful. Is there anything else anything you want to ask me, or anything else that you wanted to get to?
No, I just basically, like I said, just having you the opportunity to have me on this podcast, and I know how you've helped people through a lot of your other podcasts that I've seen that I think are excellent. I think it's just a vehicle where we can help other people.
That's it, man.
And that's all we can do. Because again, we might not be able to save the world, but man, if we can help one person, it's incredible.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's it. And but it's an adhesive, right? Like the pain and the struggle, it is. We are all connected to that because we all have it, and how we deal with it really determines, the health of our lives and the health of our relationships.
And just remember that when you think you got it bad, there's somebody else that has it worse. And I'll be honest real quick. Michael Moats, who wrote that book with me, his brother, Jess Moats, who I met through hunting, the first time I met him, we were in Colorado hunting big bucks, and we sit and talk, and he wanted to hear my story. Then he starts telling me his story. Long story short is he had 2 children, and they both died. One from cancer and the other one from an asthma attack, a little boy and a little girl. And I said to him, Jess, my story has no comparison to that. I'd go through 1 million trade centers before having anything happen to my kids. Right. And he said, Will, our faith helped us through it. They had another child that didn't know years later, Dina, who was valedictorian, just a beautiful girl. They have 2 grandchildren now. And he goes, Will, you see, God works in mysterious ways. Even if you don't believe in God, just
keep
life.
going, man. Yeah. Just
So
keep going.
what I'm saying is, again, everyone has their own World Trade Centers, and just losing 2 children, just, how much you love your kids.
Yeah.
I'd rather die than have anything happen to my kids.
For sure.
So that's what I want people to understand, that remember, your story is important. Don't ever let anybody tell you your story is not important. But don't make your story a crutch that you hurt yourself by not being able to grow.
That's right. That's right.
That's it.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Really do.
Great. It's really cool to see you, man.
Yeah, man. It's always, I see you on all movies, and
dude, you look good.
Well, we love you.
The exact fucking. You haven't aged one bit.
Yeah. Well, I lost my hair. I had some peachy hair back then. But
I don't know. Wasn't it shaved? No.
No, it was shaved short. But I finally went, and I guess people like that rock look, because my wife started getting nervous. She's like getting a lot of compliments. I'm like,
hey, bro.
Oh my God. Yeah. Now we enjoy watching you on all the films.
Thanks,
they're great. You have great roles. And I'm proud that I got to meet you and Michael and Jay, and seeing you guys, your career, just doing great things is awesome.
Thanks.
It really is.
Thanks, man. Much love, man.
All right. God bless you, bro.
God bless you. Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. Thank you. That was really awesome.